Madam Mayor, we can't hear you.
I haven't unmuted myself. So we'll start again. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. So welcome everyone to the council meeting. I'll now read the council prayer. Almighty God, we humbly seek your blessing upon this council. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of your glory and the true welfare of the people of the city of Boroondara. Amen. I now call upon Councillor Hollingsworth to read the Acknowledgement of Country.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, everyone. I acknowledge the Wurundjeri Wurrung people as the traditional owners and custodians of this land and pay my respects to their elders past and present and elders from other communities that may be listening to this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. The Local Government Act 2020 enables Council to hold virtual meetings with councillors participating remotely by electronic communication. The council meeting is being live streamed on the council website to enable public viewing of the proceedings, including councillor deliberations and voting. The meeting is also being recorded and will be made available on the council website soon after the meeting. Should technical problems be encountered, then the meeting will be adjourned until resolution. However, Council is not responsible for any technical difficulties that may be experienced by a member of the community in participating remotely in this meeting. Once the meeting commences, only limited assistance can be provided. I acknowledge the councillors present on the screen for tonight's meeting. There are a number of officers in attendance tonight, and they will be introduced as they present their reports. I'll now move to the order of business as listed on our business papers. Ms. Thayer, are there any apologies for this evening?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Park is an apology for the meeting this evening.
Thank you very much. Item 1 is adoption and confirmation of the minutes of the council meeting held on, there are several of them, 22nd of November 2021, 13 December 2021, 21 December 2021 and 7 February 2022. Councillors, could I please have a motion to adopt and confirm the minutes? Councillor Galt and seconded Councillor Sinfield. Thank you. Councillors, is anyone opposed? Thank you. So I can't see anyone opposed, so I'll declare that motion carried. Thank you, everyone. Item 2 is declaration of conflict of interest of any councillor or council officer. Now, are there any conflicts of interest to be declared? And I can see Councillor Thompson, you've got your hand up. Our CEO, Mr. Storer, has his hand up, and I think Councillor Franco. So as would, yeah, would you like to state?
Yeah, I'll just express the item. It's item 7.12, Madam Mayor, Robinson Road Car Park. The beneficial interest is with Homes Victoria, and I have a material conflict of interest in that item.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Franco.
I'll speak to that when the time comes, Madam Chair.
In general business, I believe.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Franco and Mr. Storer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to declare an interest in relation to item 7.3, which is the CEO Remuneration and Performance Review Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Storer. So our next, and we'll record all those, so our next item is deputations and presentations, petitions, public submissions. I believe there are no deputations, presentations. Petitions, Ms. Thayer?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there are 7 petitions being tabled for you tonight. The petitions are set out in the agenda papers. Accordingly, I commend the officer's recommendation to you this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Thayer. Councillors, is anyone prepared to move a motion to receive and note the petitions as printed in our business papers? Councillor Thompson, you're happy to move it?
Happy to move those petitions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Gillies, second? Thank you. Is anyone opposed to the motion? As there's no one opposed, I'll declare the motion carried. Thank you, everyone. Public submissions, I believe there's none. Thank you. The next item of business is informal meetings of councillors. Is anyone prepared to move a motion to receive and note the record of informal meetings of councillors as printed in our business papers? Councillor Hollingsworth, you're happy to move it?
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you.
And I think I saw Councillor Stavrou with his hand up next. Thank you, Councillor Stavrou. Is anyone opposed? No, thank you. So look, I'll declare the motion carried as no one's opposed. The next item is public question time. Council encourages the submission of public questions prior to 12 noon on the day of the meeting. Questions submitted prior to 12 noon will be provided with a detailed verbal response as well as a response in writing. Those submitted after 12 will receive a verbal response if possible, but will otherwise be taken on notice for a written response to be provided in due course. Ms. Thayer, do we have any public questions?
Through you, Madam Mayor, tonight we have 6 questions with notice from 3 members of the community and no questions without notice.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thayer. So I'll move to the questions. The first question is from Mr. Choi of Baldwin. The question is, why forensic DNA testing is not mentioned as a standard procedure in Borondara's Domestic Animal Management Plan 2021 to 2025. The question is allowed in accordance with Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules, as the question relates to a matter or matters regarding item 7.4 on the Council agenda this evening. I'll call upon Director Urban Living, Scott Walker, to respond to this question from Mr. Choi. Thanks, Mr. Walker.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. In response to the question, I can advise that the Domestic Animal Management Plan is a high-level strategic document addressing the requirements set out in the Domestic Animals Act 1994. The aim of the DAMP is to identify the needs of the community with a key focus on the promotion and support of pet owners to take an active role in responsible pet ownership to protect the health and care of dogs and cats, balanced with consideration of the safety, amenity and well-being of the community. Standard operating procedures are operational documents, and these are and this is a much more strategic document. Dog attacks remain a key focus for domestic animal management planning. Future actions are detailed in the DAMP, which aim to educate the community to reduce the risk of dog attack. Improving our data capture, reporting and analysis will further assist in the development of evidence-based dog attack prevention strategies.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. And Mr. Choi, you will receive a written response to your question in due course. Question 2 is also from Mr. Choi of Baldwin, and the question is, how does the Borondara Council prosecute irresponsible dog owners to prevent dog attacks without performing immediate forensic DNA testing? And again, the question is allowed because it relates to item 7.4 on the Council agenda. And so again, I'll call upon Director Urban Living, Scott Walker, to respond to Mr. Choi.
Thanks again, Madam Mayor. I can advise that cases of serious dog attack are prosecuted under Section 29 of the Domestic Animals Act 1994. Evidence-based gathering is based on a number of key points of proof, including witness statements, photographs, interviews with dog owner, and where required, we also undertake DNA testing. Council has had a high level of success using this approach. And as detailed in the DAMP, or Domestic Animal Management Plan, we also regularly review our operating practices in line with best practice procedures.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. And again, Mr. Choi, there will be a written response sent out to you. Our next question is from Diane Peck of Canterbury. The question is, can Council provide information on the number of surveys, both paper and online, and written submissions, again, both paper and online, that were received by Council by the closing date of 10 February 2022 on the proposal to create around, it says 200 additional car parking spaces, but I think it's 117 at the existing Wattle Valley Road car park in Canterbury. Thank you for the question, Ms. Peck. The question is allowed in accordance with Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules, as the question has previously been put in writing to a councillor or a member of council staff more than 10 days before the council meeting at which the question is submitted. I'll call upon Director Places and Spaces, Daniel Freer, to respond to this question from Mrs. Peck. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A combined total of 764 online and hard copy surveys have been received by the close of the consultation period. 6 duplicates within that grouping were removed prior to analysis of the remaining 758 survey responses. A total of 191 written submissions have been received. Please note that the car park proposal consulted on provides in the order of 200 car spaces in total, inclusive of the existing at-surface car parks, not an additional 200. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Freer. And Mrs. Peck, you will receive a written response. The next question is also from Diane Peck of Canterbury. It reads, can Council explain why no information on the proposal to create around 200, again, probably should be 117, additional car parking spaces at the existing Wattle Valley Road car park in Canterbury was included in the February 2022 printed edition of the Borrandara Bulletin, when it was able to include information on the draft bicycle strategy, even though both items were endorsed to proceed to consultation at the 13 December 2021 council meeting. And like the previous question, it's been allowed for the same reasons. And I'm going to hand to Mr. Bassey to answer that one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Peck rightly observed the bicycle strategy was discussed at Council on the same night as the commuter car park proposal for Canterbury, and the bicycle strategy was included in the February bulletin. It's also important to note that both consultations were at different stages, with an initial stage of consultation for the bicycle strategy having already taken place. Given the initial consultation and the fact that the bicycle strategy is a municipal-wide strategy, a decision was made prior to the content cutoff to accept late content on this topic for inclusion in the February print bulletin. For the commuter car parks, a localised strategy was adopted throughout the 8-week consultation period to allow for the delivery of a tailored information for each site. To date, our communications have included a mix of printed, digital and face-to-face communications, such as letterbox drops to residents within a 500-metre radius, posters around the precincts, in-person and online community information sessions, articles in both print and digital formats, and distribution of fact sheets. This has resulted in 2,338 responses. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bassey. And again, Mrs. Peck, you'll receive a written response. Our next question is from Mr. Ian Huntley of Balwyn North. The question is, please advise of the partnership arrangements Borrandara Council made with external organisations under the sponsorship and acknowledgement policy and the terms of each of these arrangements. The question is allowed in accordance with Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules, as the question relates to a matter or matters regarding 7.1 on the council agenda this evening. Again, I'll call upon Director Customer and Transformation, Mans Bassey, to respond to the question from Mr. Huntley.
Thank you again, Madam Mayor. The sponsorship and acknowledgement policy was adopted by Council in 2010 and lapsed in 2015. This policy did not cover partnerships between Boroondara Council and external organisations. To date, there have been no formal position in regard to partnering with external organisations. However, over the years, there have been examples of collaborations with other government organisations, education institutions and community organisations. The terms of these arrangements have been agreed to as appropriate and vary from informal alignments to signed memorandums of understandings. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bassey. And Mr. Huntley, you will receive a written response. The next question is also from Mr. Huntley of Balwyn North. Has Boroondara Council had any communications with representatives of the federal government which would indicate that its process of consultation for proposed car parks in Glenferrie, Camberwell and Canterbury aligns with the likely timelines for the 2022 federal election campaign period? The question is allowed in accordance with Chapter 2 of the Governance Rules, as the question has previously been put in writing to a councillor or a member of council staff more than 10 days before the council meeting at which the question is submitted. I'll call upon Director, Places and Spaces, Daniel Freer, to respond to the question from Mr. Huntley. Thanks, Mr.
Thank
Freer.
you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. In my research since receiving the question today, no, there is no correspondence that has been found to indicate that that is the fact.
Thank you, Mr. Freer, and that response in writing will go out to you, Mr. Huntley. That brings us to the end of our questions. Thank you. So item 6 is notice of motions. Ms. Saar, do we have any notices of motion?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, there are no notices of motion to receive this evening.
Thank you very much. Item 7, presentation of officer reports. And I'll just check, does any councillor have any issues or concerns with respect to the order of the agenda, or wish to flag any item for discussions or items which may not need to be discussed and then thus can be moved on block as per the officer's recommendation? And I do have a suggestion for some on block ones. Probably I should just say that if any of these are agreed to be moved on block, it's just to reassure the community watching that that is simply because we've read the reports and are very comfortable with what's being proposed. So the ones that we're considering being on block are 7.3, Instrument of Delegation from Council to the CEO, Employment and Remuneration Committee. 7.6, Union Road, Surrey Hills Level Crossing Removal, Urban Design Advice. 7.8, Union Road, Surrey Hills Level Crossing Removal, Long-Term Traffic Impacts. 7.10, MAV Rules Review Discussion Paper 2021-22 submission. And 7.11, Boroondara City Council motions to the Australian Local Government Association, ALGA, National General Assembly of Local Government. So they're the ones we're thinking of. Councillor Franco.
I would like items 7.6 and 7.8 relating to Surrey Hills and Union Road level crossing to not be considered as part of the en bloc motions, as I have questions in relation to the reports. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. 7.6 and 7.8. Okay, so that leaves us with 7.3 7.1 and 7.11 are the only ones now left in as on block. Do I have a mover for those being moved on block? Mr. Story?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If it's going to include 7.3, I will leave the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll check. Perhaps we should check whether councillors are happy to move that motion. Councillor Watson, you happy?
Happy to move that on block motions, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Stavro, happy to second?
Happy to. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? So I'll declare that motion carried. Thank you. So we'll now go to 7.1. Can you just bear with me a moment? Thank you very much. I'll just pause for a minute because I think we can get Mr. Storer back in because I don't believe we're discussing the one. So let's move on to presentation of officer reports. And the first item is sponsorship and partnership policy. And that will be introduced by Jennifer Reid, Manager Strategy and Performance. Ms. Reid.
For you, Madam Mayor. As you're aware, councillors, with the new Burundara Community Plan adopted in October 2021, there are a number of new strategies that councillors committed to progress what is most important to our community. Partnerships and sponsorships provide us with the opportunity to progress these strategies through sharing knowledge, resources and services with other government entities, local government authorities and local businesses. When done well, partnerships and sponsorships can improve planning and process, share costs and improve access to services for communities. They can increase our reach and help us communicate and engage with our target audience. Councils throughout Australia have often used sponsorships and partnerships as a means of adding value, cost recovery for service delivery and/or events, and knowledge sharing to deliver better outcomes for their communities. A great example currently occurring in Melbourne is Greening the West. Multiple councils identified an opportunity to come together and partner with organisations including Melbourne Water, DELP, Vic Roads, Vic Uni and Parks Victoria with the objective of planning for a greener, healthier future. The types of things they're collaborating on include sharing data, joint funding applications, better purchasing power, stronger foundation for advocacy and collaboration on joint projects of interest. There are other examples being utilised by LGAs across Australia, including events like Melbourne Fashion Week, food and cultural festivals, sustainability events, awards ceremonies, and arts and music festivals. The sponsorship and partnership policy has been developed to outline the position of council on engaging in sponsorships and partnerships with external organisations and businesses. Considerable research was undertaken during the development process, including reviewing 30 other local council sponsorship and partnership policies and guidelines, the Victoria Government Sponsorship and Partnership Policy, and the Independent Commission Against Corruption Sponsorship Guidelines. We've also compared this policy with a previous sponsorship and acknowledgement policy from 2010, which has now lapsed. The sponsorship and partnership policy allows us to explore and pursue opportunities through clear guidance on decision making and ensures that council's reputation is always at the forefront of any decisions through the risk mitigation processes outlined within the policy. It ensures that council is acting in the best interest of the community, the best interests of council, and is acting ethically and being transparent in its dealings with potential partners and sponsors. For noting, the council report and the footer of the draft sponsorship and partnership policy reference the policy years as 2021 to 2025. This should be 2022 to 2026 and will be updated accordingly.
Thanks, Ms. Reid. Any questions for Ms. Reid? Councillor Watson and then Councillor Sinfield. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No question, but would be delighted to move the motion at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. I have a couple of brief questions. First of all, I'm wondering why this policy aligns with Mr. Bassi as the Director of Customer Transformation, as opposed to Ms. McLean and the Directorate of Community Support, or have I misread things?
Ms. Reid, are you happy to answer that?
Yeah, there's a newly established Partnerships and Innovation team that sits under Strategy and Performance, looking at I guess, a global scan of what other local governments are doing. We work very closely in partnership with all the directorates to make sure that we can pursue opportunities under partnership.
Thank you. Page 12 seems to, by my reading, suggest an assumption of approval. If I can just bring that up in front of me, wherever it's gone, apologies. And I wonder whether consideration might be given to changing the wording on page 12, where it says that the policy can, applications for sponsorship and partnership will come to ELT for consideration or be elevated to a sitting of council if they're over $10,000 or regarded as moderate or higher risk for approval as opposed to for consideration, which by my reading gives a perception that it would be approved.
Ms. Reid?
I'm happy with those amendments.
And my final question is, would it be possible, and perhaps the Councillor Watson, who has foreshadowed a motion, might consider this as well, that it be flagged for a review after 12 months. I note that in the report it does say that Council can review the policy at any stage, but I think with new policies coming in, it's prudent to put them on the calendar for review after 12 months to see how it's working for us. Would that be possible, Ms. Reid?
I think we're seeing nodding.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have any other questions.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
We'll get
Councillor
there.
Thompson.
We're playing unmuting here. Just a very quick one, Madam Mayor, maybe to the Councillor Watson, who's foreshadowed, just to correct the date in the officer's recommendation, assuming that Councillor Watson was going to move the officer's recommendation to what Ms. Reid has actually just indicated, 2022 to 2026, I think the time frame was. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Any other questions? Thank you. So we'll go back to Councillor Watson, and I think there are 3 little changes that we're discussing. Perhaps we better see it back on the screen, but sorry, only be a minute. Or maybe everyone remembers it. Oh, there we are. So that needs the date changed. That can be done. Yeah. Be there in a minute. And Councillor Watson, there was that small amendment that Councillor Sinfield asked for, and the review in 12 months. You're comfortable with those two as you're added into your motion? Thank you. It's currently being edited. we're nearly there. Okay. I think we probably all know what we're talking about if we can't get it. There we are. Is everyone happy with that? Can everyone see? Councillor Watson, you're happy to move that? Thank you. We might take it off the screen now. Thank you. And hopefully everyone's had a chance. And is there a seconder? Councillor Sinfield, you're happy to second? Thank you. For the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed to that motion?
Not opposed, Madam Mayor. There's just a little typo in that last dot point. That's all.
Okay. As long as we fix that, are you happy to? Yeah, thank you. All fixed, I gather, all noted. So nobody's opposed. So I'll go to Councillor Watson as the mover. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You're delighted to move this motion forward this evening. We heard mention of different partnerships and the great things that they've achieved in other councils, but we have a 30-plus year tradition in the city Burundara of the Burundara Stedford, and modernising and updating the sponsorship policy will enable us to work more productively with our sponsors and also with the people who put their wonderful talents forward to compete in the Stedford itself. So this will enable us to grow and meet the needs of grow the Stedford, meet the needs, and of course there will be other partnership opportunities as well. So I'm just delighted to be able to move this one forward and move this motion tonight. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Sinfield, did you want to speak briefly?
Thank you, I will. Just in relation also to the motion there where it cites on page 14 that the amendment needs to be made, I wonder whether we might strike out the page reference. I'm sure Ms Reid gets the essence, and if it's elsewhere throughout the document, that administrative change ought to be made as well. But to my comments, as Councillor Watson said, I absolutely welcome the introduction of this. I think it improves transparency and equality of application of the policy or the guidelines to applicants or prospective partners in this arrangement. It also really seeks to protect our reputation, and that's important to me, and that's something we've been working towards for a number of years since this idea was floated some time ago. Thank you to the officers that have worked on this. I know it hasn't been an easy one to try and strike the right balance between the other examples that have been cited through local government and beyond. I welcome the inclusion and thank officers for their willingness to review this in 12 months' time. I think it's important to make sure that before these policies are embedded that they are reviewed and suitable, and there's always various unforeseen circumstances that may arise through the first 12 months of a policy that might require amendment. I'll leave my comments there. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sinfield. Councillor Watson, did you wish to say anything further to wrap up? No, thank you. So I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? I don't believe there's anyone against. No, so that's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. So the next item is 7.2, December 2021 Quarterly Performance Report. And again, that's going to be introduced, I believe, by Jennifer Reid, Manager, Strategy and Performance. Thanks, Ms. Reid.
Through you, Madam Mayor. As you're aware, councillors, the draft October to December Quarterly Performance Report 2021 reports on council's progress against the refreshed Boroondara Community Plan 21 to 31 and the annual budget 21 to 22. The overall financial position at 31 December 2021 is satisfactory. The year-to-date surplus result of $106.65 million is due to the striking of full-year annual rates in August 2021. The surplus result will reduce over the course of the year as council delivers services to the community. In addition, the favourable result against year-to-date budget of $6.85 million or 7% is due to timing differences for income and expenditure across council. For the December quarter, we've completed 11% of our annual initiatives and commenced a further 89%. Council is on track with its progress towards annual initiatives. The achievement of the strategic indicators and LGPRF performance indicators reported quarterly indicates that the majority were at or above forecast. There have been some impacts from ongoing COVID-19 restrictions as well as extreme weather events.
Thanks, Ms. Reid. Councillors, are there any questions for Ms. Reid? Councillor Gold.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Look, can I first go to the annual initiatives completed and also the strategic indicators met, the first one being 11% and the second being 62%. I mean, I'm interested to know a little bit more about both of those seem a little low. Is there any further explanation that can explain that?
Thanks, Ms. Reid.
The annual initiatives completed being 11% is consistent with our performance last year. Typically at this time of year, 11% is what we would consider on track or similar. Depending on the initiative, those initiatives could be forecast to be completed at the commencement of the year or the completion of the year. So we would consider those to be still on track. In terms of the strategic indicators, the completion is probably lower than we would have expected in a non-impacted year from COVID-19. And there were also some extreme weather events that contributed to the completion of those strategic indicators.
If I could ask through you, Mayor, another question.
Okay.
For both the capital projects and the priority projects, when I look, I can't remember the page it was on, but there was a projection through to the end of the financial year, and both those were projected on what I'd call a J-curve. I'd be interested to know the basis of that J-curve, because generally in construction projects, it would more or less be a bell-shaped curve with, unless they're all for new projects and they're only part way through. So the first question is, in relation to that, why did we choose a J-curve? And secondly, if in fact that is correct, can we expect, because both of the capital projects and the priority projects have fallen a little behind, do we expect that to fall further behind by the end of the financial year? Thank you.
I think Mr. Storer has an answer, or Mr. Freer.
Madam Mayor, I was going to suggest Mr. Freer might talk about this, particularly in the context of our history, because this is a reasonably typical trend, but perhaps he can address the question in more detail.
Thanks, Mr. Storer. Mr. Freer.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Essentially for the capital program, there are two significant projects which are multi-year projects in the Kew Recreation Centre and the Canterbury Community Centre, which affect the bulk of the capital spend and really, I guess, influence that profile. Yeah. At the time of the forecasting for this report in December of last year, with respect to the Kew Recreation Centre, there was an issue with the delivery of steel and the cost profile or the cash flow of that project, which meant that a significant amount was then to be expended in the latter part of the financial year. What has transpired in the month since then is that the steel has arrived and we're seeing a return to a profile a little more typical than what we would have expected. The other element of that is in regard to the timing of a lot of our civil works, which of the physical works commencing in the latter half of the financial year, where all of the design, tendering and procurement work is undertaken in the earlier part of the year. So typically we see that profile over years, but certainly is affected by those two larger projects in the cash flow over the multi-years.
Thank you, Mr. Freer. Councillor Gold, does that answer your query?
Oh, it certainly does with regards to the profile of the curve, and it being dominated by two major projects, that explains that. Do we expect, given that both of those, particularly the priority projects, has fallen from 16 to 12 million, do we expect that fall behind to continue, or are you really saying the Q thing will pick that up?
Mr. Freer?
The Q program will be reflected in the capital program. In terms of the priority works, they are forecast to get to a completion point at the end of the year, so we will see a catch up across the organisation.
Thank you, Mr. Freer. That's excellent.
Thank you. Any other questions for officers? Can't see any hands up. Would somebody like to move a motion? Councillor Thompson.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation, Madam Mayor.
Do we need it back up on the screen for everyone to see? Sorry, we'll have a brief pause. And I think Councillor Gold, did you have your hand up possibly to second once we see what it is? Councillor Thompson, that's the motion you wanted to move?
Happy to move that motion. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thanks. And Councillor Gold, that you're happy to second that one? Thank you. Now, for the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed to that motion? Okay, nobody's put their hands up, so I'll go to Councillor Thompson to speak to his motion.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Pretty straightforward, this QPR report that we've got in front of us, albeit it's on the back of some quite extraordinary events with the storm towards the end of last year, as well as obviously the tail end of COVID, and very much looking forward to the delivery of the projects, and hopefully they do catch up to the questions that Councillor Goltz raised and been responded to, and that the rest of this financial year goes with not too many surprises along the way, Madam Mayor. So we deliver a good budget at the end of this year expenditure. I'll commend that motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Gold is the second. Would you like to speak? Or?
Oh, not really much more, just to commend the officers on an excellent report. I had a number of other questions, but as I read on, I found all the answers. So thank you. It was very thorough.
Very good. I presume you don't want to add any more, Councillor Thompson? No, thank you. So I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? So I'll declare that motion carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Ms. Reid. The next item is it's not 7.3, it's 7.4. Adoption of the Domestic Animal Management Plan. I believe that's going to be introduced by Paul Mitchellmore, Manager, Civic Services. Thank you, Mr. Mitchellmore.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, everyone. The purpose of this report is to present to Council the revised City of Boroondara Domestic Animal Management Plan 2021 to 2025, or abbreviated as the DAMP, for consideration and adoption. The Domestic Animals Act 1994 requires all Victorian councils to prepare an animal management plan at 4 yearly intervals. The City of Boroondara Domestic Animal Management Plan expired in December 2021. An extension was, however, sought and granted by Animal Welfare Victoria on behalf of the Secretary of the Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions to submit Council's DAMP no later than March 2022. The extension was sought to enable appropriate staffing and the drafting of a new plan, which included stakeholder consultation. This report now informs councillors of feedback received from the community consultation on the DAMP. The community was invited to provide feedback on the DAMP from the 1st of November 21 to the 28th of November 21 via the Engage Boroondara page on Council's website. 14 submissions were received, including comments from residents provided in 2 emails sent to Council during the preceding months. Most respondents were positive. Some respondents, however, expressed dissatisfaction with aspects of the draft DAMP, including lack of action regarding cats and no recommendation to impose a cat curfew. The feedback did provide greater insight to better understand certain changing needs and expectations of some members of the community. Having considered the feedback from respondents, enhancements to the DAMP were made to provide a strengthened and balanced approach to animal management in the municipality. The DAMP is reviewed and reported on annually, however, thereby allowing the opportunity for an assessment on the progression of the proposed actions and level of success. It will also enable Council to continue to be responsive to emerging animal management issues. Officer's recommendation is that Council resolve to adopt the City of Boroondara Domestic Animal Management Plan 2021-2025. On consideration and acceptance of the Officer's recommendation, the DAMP will be submitted to the Secretary of the Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions via Animal Welfare Victoria no later than March 2022 and published on Council's website. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell-Moore. Are there any questions for Mr. Mitchell-Moore? Councillor Gold and Councillor Biggar.
Look, my apologies, Mr. Mitchell-Moore, if I've missed this in the report, but you did mention there the cat curfews, and I picked it up early in the report. But have we decided where do we stand on the thoughts towards cat curfews?
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell-Moore.
Thank you, Councillor Gold. So the format of our objective towards cat curfews is consistent with that provided by Animal Welfare Victoria. Whilst we're not recommending a cat curfew at this point in time, the plan does have multiple targeted activities focused on responsible cat ownership, as well as discrete cat trapping programs in sensitive areas across the municipality. The necessity for a cat curfew will continue to be reviewed ongoing as part of the scheduled review of our DAMP.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Biggar, you had your hand up with a question.
It was actually a very minor point, but just to say that it's going to feel a bit deja vu, but I believe the report refers to 2021 to 2025. Do we want to, at the risk of annoying my fellow councillors, do we need to update that to 2022 to 2026 on the first page?
Mr. Walker had his hand up to respond.
Given that this plan was due to be completed last year, so it expired last year, the dates on it are correct and will be consistent with the formal next review that will occur and be required under the Domestic Animal Management Plan. So in this case, it should remain as indicated.
Fine, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? No, so I think it's time for a motion if anyone would like to move one. Councillor Stavrou, which motion would you like to move?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to move the officer's recommendation.
Which was basically to adopt the plan. Yep, thank you. And Councillor Gillies, you happy to second? Thank you. Is anyone against the motion to adopt the plan? I can't see any hands up, so we'll go back to you, Councillor Stavrou, to speak to your motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I won't say a lot, just to thank the officers for putting this report together and having quite a number of good initiatives in there, in terms, particularly towards responsible pet ownership. We love our pets here in Boroondara, both dogs and cats, and I think the community will see that it is a reasonable approach, and commend the motion to my fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Stavrou. Councillor Gillies, did you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. really just to note that I have to admit it came as a little bit of a surprise to me as a long-term both cat and dog owner that there was something like 16,000 dogs and a little shy of 5,500 cats in Boroondara. Those that we know of course. It's a huge number of animals, and it's important that we do manage this well. But I absolutely applaud and thank the officers for the work in the recommendations of this report. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Councillor Stafford, did you have anything you wanted to add before I put the motion?
Nothing further, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? So that motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell-Moore. Our next item is 7.5, Contract 2021-2027, I think. Oh, no, sorry, Contract 2021/207, Materials, Cartage and Leaf Disposal Services. And that's going to be introduced by David Shepherd, Manager, Environmental Sustainability and Open Spaces. Thank you, Mr. Shepherd.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. This report seeks to appoint a provider for contract 2021/207, Materials, Cartage, Leaf Disposal Services. The contract's for an initial period of 3 years with a possible extension of 2 years. The contract provides for export of green waste materials and ensures that we limit our stockpiles at the Q depot. The contract includes turning our sweeper waste into organic fertiliser, green waste into mulch, and logwoods into recycled products. I commend the officer recommendation, which you can see on the screen now, which is in effect to award this contract to Garden State Mulching Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Stavro.
No questions at this stage, Madam Mayor. I just foreshadow an alternative motion when it's appropriate.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Through you to the officers. I'm just noticing or noting, just a point of clarification, the estimated cost of the contract's $2 million over the first 3-year period, yet the expenditures proposed in the 22-23 budget. Am I understanding that correct? Or is it amortised across 3 years?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the $2 million is the value over the 5-year possible period of the contract, so approximately $400,000 per year.
So when it's proposed in accordance with the Council's proposed 22-23 budget, are we talking long-term budget?
Yes, we are.
Thanks, Madam Mayor.
That answers your question, Councillor Thompson. Yeah. Any other questions for the officers? No. So, Councillor Stavro, you foreshadowed an alternate motion.
I have, Madam Mayor, and if it's the right time now, I would like to adopt the motion as is, but exclude bullet point number 3.
That's yes. So, Councillor Stavro, the motion that's up on the screen, is that what you're seeking to move?
Madam Mayor, I'm trying to scroll. I think I can scroll. Yes, that's exactly it. Thank you.
Thank you. Has everyone had a chance to look at that? Do we have a seconder? We'll just get that down for a minute. Councillor Thompson?
Madam Mayor, just a point of clarification, if I can, if you'll allow.
Absolutely.
Because we haven't got a seconder as yet. I just question of the officers, if point 3 is to be removed, does that negate the cost that I've just asked the question on, which was over a 5-year term?
Mr. Shepherd.
Through you, Madam Mayor, it would reduce the cost down to approximately $1.2 million over the 3-year period.
So my suggestion to the mover is, if that's the intent, to have the two be consistent within the motion.
Okay, maybe we'll report. Councillor Stover, does that sound as you would like?
I'm comfortable to amend any financial requirements to make a consistency within the plan. There is an optionality in there, so at any rate, already. May I then ask Mr. Freer, with the optionality, do we include in the budget immediately the outlays, even though they are optional anyway?
So Mr. Shepherd or Mr. Freer?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it's an annual supply contract, and so the provision is made on an annual basis. As Councillor Thompson has recommended, it would be appropriate to give the estimate of the total contract for the first 3 years, if that's the resolution of the council to award it for that period. Any further term of the contract would be then subject to a further resolution of council and any further budget allocation made by council in future years.
Thank you, Mr. Freer. So are the mover and the seconder, oh, well, I'm not sure you are the seconder, Councillor Thompson. Is the mover happy with that?
I'm entirely comfortable with that recommendation to change the amounts in the contract.
Okay. So maybe we'd better pause for a moment. And Councillor Thompson, if that's done, are you putting your hand up to second?
If that's correct, Madam Mayor, yes, I'm happy to second.
Okay, thank you. We'll just pause for a moment. Nice when we're all back in the chamber and this is more efficient. You could just bear with me, we're just checking something. Thank you. Councillor Stavro and Thompson, does that look like the motion you'd like to move and second? Councillor Stavro, yes. Mr. Freer has his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I just ask that there were some words further on the screen to that first part of the resolution that should also be deleted, which was to the extension period.
I'm hearing that it's already deleted. You can see them there, Mr. Freer.
I think the words an extension of 2 years to be exercised at the discretion of council also needs to come off.
Oh, thank you. I think we're on our way. Mr. Freer, that looks right now?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Stavry, Councillor Thompson, you happy? Thank you. So for the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed to that motion that was up on the screen? Can't see any hands up, so I'll return to you, Councillor Stavry, to speak to your motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm delighted to actually moving this motion and really thanking the officers for their work, particularly as this contract will seek to take Boroondara to best practice in waste management, particularly and also to further support our efforts in the circular economy, a major part of our climate action plan. However, seeking to always improve the value for the money that our ratepayers spend is always a key consideration. And one of the rationale really that I actually moved to take out that provision. Without further ado, I commend the current motion to my fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Stavry. Councillor Thompson, would you like to speak? No? Yes? No. Thank you. Councillor Stavry, I presume you're happy for me to put the motion now? Thank you. So I'll now put the motion that we have all seen. Those in favour? Those against? So that motion's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We'll go to item 7.6, Union Road, Surrey Hills level crossing removal, urban design advice. I believe this is going to be introduced by Andrea Lomdale, Senior Transport Planner. Thanks, Ms. Lomdale.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. Tonight we present the final draft urban design advice for the Union Road Surrey Hills level crossing removal for council endorsement and adoption. We also present the associated advocacy plan for council adoption. The final draft urban design advice, or UDA, provides guidance to inform the design of open spaces proposed by the LXRP and decking across the rail trench at Union Road, Surrey Hills. The UDA was developed by urban design firm Lat Studios with significant input from the Surrey Hills community and internal council stakeholders. It presents the community's vision for the open spaces and decking, concept plans and renders to bring the open spaces to life, guiding principles, multiple objectives and 92 supporting guidelines. The advocacy plan details the activities that council, councillors and council officers can take to see the LXRP accept and rely on the final draft UDA, which is attachment 1, in their planning, design and delivery of the public open spaces and decking. The advocacy plan is intended to be a live document with the ability to include or remove activities and stakeholders as needed. Councillors, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Lomdale. Questions for Ms. Lomdale? Councillor Franco?
Thank you. Thank you. Why, through you, Madam Chair, why did we not conduct any public consultation in relation to council's advocacy for delivering commuter car parking at the existing Surrey Hills train station to the northern side of that, using the $15 million grant from the Federal Commuter Car Parking Fund, which is no reference. There's no reference in the council report or the draft attachments.
I'll hand to Mr. Freer to answer your question, Councillor Franco.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The draft urban design framework provides 11 principles, and parking is one of those matters that is considered. And one of the actions from there is consideration of off-street car parking at a no less amount than what is provided for at this stage. Given the timing of the work in developing the urban design advice, which was undertaken prior to Council's resolution, which was made public in November in respect to the federal government's commitment for additional car parking at the Surrey Hill station on the state land, reference was not provided at that time. I will say that that is a project that has been identified by the federal government and have been working with the state government, and council has provided written advice to the federal and state government in regard to our advocacy efforts.
Can I
Thank you.
ask a
Councillor
follow-up?
Franco, you had a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. I note that, well, what is the reason for perhaps for members of the public who are looking for council keeping the resolution confidential until 30 November 2021 and for keeping the report continuing, that the underpinning council officers report confidential in relation to the commuter car park for Surrey Hills train station?
Mr. Freer, you're happy to answer that?
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. The underlying reasoning behind the council's confidentiality of the resolution relates to the other parts of the resolution, which were under negotiation at that time with the LXRP in relation to decking and asset management.
Thank you. And a further follow-up question? Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
The second round of community consultation took place, did it not, in respect of the urban design guidelines between 30 November, I'm reading here from the attached council reports or reports to council, between 30 November 2021 and 19 December 2021. That is, after the confidential discussion and resolution of council was made public. So we could have consulted had we wanted to in relation to with members of the community in respect of that, could we not?
Is that a response for you, Mr. Freer?
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we could have consulted the community or made reference to that. The council resolution was made public at that same time. We did not draw the community's reference to that through this document, given the work had been undertaken on the basis, as you see it attached now, really in respect to open space work. There was not design work undertaken for car parking as is provided in the document.
Mr. Storer?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd also just like to make it really clear that the Minister made it very clear to us that the car park money was not going to be taken up by the LXRP and the state government for this project. There are various points of view as to why that is the case, but the Minister, in a meeting I attended with her, was very clear that the funding from the federal government was not going to be used to build this car park as part of this particular project. It may well be, as Mr. Freer has intimated, that there is a separate project at a later time which might include the federal funding and the car park. That's a matter between the state, because it is state land, of course, between the state and the federal government. But I think it's important to understand the Minister had been very clear with us that it was not intended to take up the federal money for that commuter car park on that site.
Thank you, Mr. Storer.
Can I ask a follow-up question to what Mr. Storer has advised? Can I ask if that advice, the verbal advice from the Minister, and I presume, I'm curious whether it's the federal minister or the state minister, so I'm not sure. And what was that advice in response specifically to a formal request by council calling upon the use of the funds to build the commuter car park at the existing, adjacent to the existing Surrey Hills train station? So was that specifically in response to our formal, I'm assuming we've made a formal submission to that effect, and have we received any response in writing from either the federal government or the state government other than the verbal advice?
No, there's no written advice that I can recall. Mr. Freer may have better recollection, and if he has, certainly can mention that to you. We were having a conversation with the Minister about a number of aspects of the LXRP project in Surrey Hills. of which the commuter car park possibility was but one. So there were also discussions taking place in relation to the decking over the trench and also the open space to be provided in that locality as part of the overall project. So there were a number of matters which were the subject of a discussion, not so much the subject of ongoing communication or correspondence. So that's really where that situation sits at the present time.
Thank you. Mr. Freer has something to add, I believe.
Yes, Madam Mayor, if I can add, and I'm just trying to find the date of the letter. I can't put my fingers on it immediately, but a letter was provided to the Minister seeking a meeting with the mayors of Boroondara and Whitehorse, and I think the meeting was in early October of last year. As I say, I can't immediately find that.
Thank you. Councillor Franco.
Thank you. Can I ask specifically, I suppose to be absolutely clear, has Council submitted formal written requests to the federal and state governments pursuant to the resolution of 25 October, in which we opted to call on the federal and state governments to deliver the commuter car parking adjacent to the existing Surrey Hills train station site? And have we received a response in writing from the federal minister? I know we've had discussions about the verbal comments from state minister.
Happy to respond, Madam Chair. The correspondence which was required has been submitted. I can't obviously provide you a copy of it at the present time, not in front of me. And that is part of the reason for meeting with the minister, the state minister. It's a state-owned asset, of course, not a council or a federal-owned asset. So the minister at the state level has to be willing to accept the federal grant, as it is to the state government, not to council. And if there was no willingness to accept that grant, then of course the project can't proceed. So the aspiration was that by speaking with the minister, there may well be some clarity provided around the provision of that car park. And as I said, the minister was very clear in her conversation with us about the way in which that funding was viewed at that point in time. And there are differences of view, as I understand it, between the state and the federal government about what took place between their various departments. I don't have the detail of that. And I have not communicated directly with the federal minister, because the state minister is the one who needs to decide to accept the funding that's being made available.
Thank you, Mr. Storer. Councillor Franco, one more?
One more question, and my last one. Is it fair to say that in the 2 consultation sessions we undertook that we received no community feedback on a lack of commuter car parking in or around the existing Surrey Hills train station? There's no reference to any such comments in the reports that are attached for us today, only references that I can see to improving the high quality of open space and some of the pedestrian and the active transport arrangements in the vicinity.
Madam Chair, I might ask Mr. Freer to answer the detail of that question as to what it is the trader groups and so on have been talking about in their various submissions. I would just make the observation that the purpose of the report before you tonight is not to address those issues. It's actually in relation to the urban design advice. So we're sort of straying outside the purpose of the report. But Mr. Freer may be able to talk about what it is that the traders and other groups have been discussing with regard to car parking.
Thank you, Mr. Freer.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor, Ms. Lomdale or Mr. Hondrakis might also want to make comment to this, but in the workshops that have been held and the consultation where officers walked the streets in talking to traders have received feedback in respect to car parking, and has been quite a significant issue in many of the reports alongside this report that the council has considered in regard to ensuring that there is no net loss of car parking in this area as the two stations are combined to one, to a premium station. And we believe that there is a net loss of car parking. As I said earlier, that's been the subject of previous resolutions and has been developed on the back of consultation with traders particularly and local residents.
And one question just is that in relation to the need for commuter car parking, free commuter car parking, or the need for car parking short stay to underpin the commercial centre?
Well, we are probably getting into a bit much detail, but let's go to Mr. Hondrakis and see if he can answer, and then let's move on to other questions. Mr. Hondrakis.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. Look, historically, we have had significant commuter overflow parking issues in the precinct. And that's why we've got a number of short-term restrictions in the streets to the north and south of the railway line. The issues were so significant that we actually had to introduce restrictions between Mont Albert Road through to Whitehorse Road in the north-south streets. So, and they were genuinely long-term issues associated with commuters. So it did extend all the way through to Whitehorse Road, which is why those streets have short-term restrictions to manage that overflow commuter parking issue.
Thanks, Mr. Hondrakis.
And I'll just say, I won't ask a question, it's more of you.
This is question time, don't forget.
Yes, look, I just flag that I have an amendment to the officer's recommended motion, which I'd like to move in at the appropriate juncture.
Thank you. Noted that. Councillor Thompson, did you have questions?
I did, Madam Mayor, but for fear of going over the same questions that have been answered, I'll hold my questions. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thompson. Does anyone else have questions? Councillor Picker.
I'll flag that it does sort of relate to the questions that Councillor Franco has asked, but it really just because I guess it's about, for me, about community consultation. So is there a view that that there would be an opportunity in the future to have a more complete consultation with the community about car parking in general in this location? Or is that not something that's seen as?
Yeah, Mr. Freer will answer that.
Thank you again, through you, Madam Mayor. The urban design advice has a principle in respect to really seeking no net loss of car parking. As Mr. Storer said earlier, the commuter car parking in this location is all state-owned land on VicTrack land, and council has been previously resolved, and we've written many a time now to the Minister to seek the reinstatement of the same number of car parks that are there now. So I think we've widely pushed that point. In terms of consultation on how that gets resolved, we have asked the LXRP to undertake that as part of their work, and you'll see from the report at 7.8 there are a range of traffic movement issues as well, where we've asked the LXRP to, or seeking resolution from council to support a position to ask the LXRP to explore that more greatly and undertake a process to identify that with the community.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Apologies, Madam Mayor. I may as well ask my question whilst we're on the topic. Mr. Hondrakis has indicated that there's a deficit of commuter car parks in the area, and there's actually a deficit in what's tabled currently with the LXRP at this site. Subject to our resolution item 7 that was made public on the 30th of November, has two questions, one question in two parts. How has that item 7 been resolved with the state? And given that there's a deficit in the precinct, how does this discussion relate to the Wattle Valley Road consultation, or are they two mutually exclusive things.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Mr. Freer, is that one for you?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. To address the second part, they are mutually exclusive. They are separate projects, Wattle Valley Road being on a council site in relation to the Canterbury station. In regard to the first part of your question, Council has enacted that resolution by seeking a meeting with the Minister, and I did find the date of that was the 20th of October of last year that meeting was held with the Minister, and discussions were held at that time in respect to it. Again, to reiterate Mr. Storer's advice, the Minister has not responded formally, or the federal government has not responded formally to that proposition, but Council continues to press its case that the replacement of commuter car parking in Surrey Hills is the responsibility of the state government.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Freer. And just for clarification, I was in attendance with the CEO at that meeting as well.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Stavro.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I think the car parks have been done to great length, but and I apologise for the extra question, but we spoke about the deficit, and perhaps this is the question for Mr. Andrakis, of car parks in the area. What about, are there any issues regarding traffic flow, given that there's a merging of the two train stations into one? And what are the implications and what is done about that?
Through you, Madam Chair. Look, certainly the traffic issues need to be taken into account, and that'll form part of the item following through here. So there will be a need for a traffic study. We're going from 2 stations through to 1. There will be a closure of Beresford Street up at Mont Albert Road, which is in the city of Whitehorse, and that will actually have implications for streets in Boroondara. So there will be a redistribution of traffic by virtue of a new station location, which is more central, and by virtue of the closure of Beresford Street up at Mont Albert Road. And that's part of the recommendation for the report to be formally considered by Council, where we actually call on the LXRP to undertake a local area traffic management study, so we can assess, involve the community, come up with a plan, and request that the LXRP implement it in time for the opening of the new station.
Thank you, and I think that's 7.8 tonight. Thank you, Mr. Andrakis. Any other questions? No, so I'll go back to you, Councillor Franco. You foreshadowed an alternative motion.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation, but adding 3 additional points. And I will see if I can find my own notes here. And the purpose being to be completely transparent in our public submissions in relation to the urban design guidelines. So I propose, should I talk to the motion at this stage, or would you prefer that I?
No, I think we need to see it. You haven't circulated this to officers?
I have circulated it to officers, but I can read it out. I don't know if the officers.
Very late. They don't seem to have it.
Okay. Well, I can. How would you like to handle it? Would you like me to read out the additional 4 or 5?
Yes. Chair, can I suggest, Madam Chair, that if Councillor Franco has it written, he email a copy of that to the officers immediately, or email the email he has said he has already sent to the officers.
Yes.
So that we actually have it on file, and they can use it straight away, which will save everybody a lot of time.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Storer. So would you like to read?
Yes, I'm just forwarding the email that I've
sent perhaps.
Councillor Freer.
Councillor Sinfield.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I wonder if perhaps a short 5-minute or 2-minute adjournment might be appropriate for any socialisation to make sure that the officers have enough time to display it appropriately.
Very good idea. Are you happy to move a request and seconded? I think it was Councillor Bigger, and I think we're all in favour. Okay, so 5-10 minutes. Thank you. 5 minutes maybe. Thanks, everyone. Sorry, we're doing a bit of microphone messing up here. Thank you, everyone. Could I please have a motion to resume the meeting? Councillor Sinfield and seconded Councillor Thompson. I presume no one's opposed. So I'll declare that carried. So our meeting is resumed. And Councillor Franco, you had an amended motion you were going to propose.
Thank you. Yes, I don't know if you can put it up on the screen, Madam
About
Chair.
to, I believe.
So I propose to move the officer's motion as written in the council report, which is shown in points 1, 2, and 3. And I don't know if I should read that out. It probably would be clearer, followed by
Probably 4,
additional.
5, and 6.
Okay, I'm trying to just
unless you want me to.
Well, look, I'll read 4, 5, and 6, which are the additional points. So 4, note that on 25 October 2021, Boroondara Council resolved to, and I quote, advocate to the federal and state governments to deliver commuter car parking at the existing Surrey Hills train station northern car park using the 15 million grant funding from the UCFP to provide a single deck of car parking above the ground level car park proposed to the north of the rail tracks, unquote. 5, note that the urban design consultation that ran from 8 to 28 September 2021 and the second community consultation held between 30 November 2021 and 19 December 2021 did not include reference to the proposed commuter car park. I had an additional second sentence there that's already been taken out that was a little bit controversial in discussion. But 6, update the draft Union Road Surrey Hills level crossing removal urban design advice and advocacy plan to include reference to Council's proposed approach to delivering commuter car parking at the existing Surrey Hills train station northern car park using the 15 million grant funding from the Commuter Car Park Fund. I think it'd be clearer, Federal Commuter Car Park Fund.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. So we might, yes, thank you. Now, do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Bigger, you're happy to second?
Yes, though I have a question. Is that possible to second and then ask a question to clarify? Or do we need to go ahead and give it a second? I'll go ahead and second for the sake of discussion. Happy to do that.
I think we might have to do that. So just for the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed? Thank you, councillors. So we'll go to the mover, Councillor Franco, to speak to your motion.
Thank you. It's incumbent upon Council to be completely transparent in relation to our advocacy and involvement in respect of the 650 million commuter car park fund, of which 65 million was allocated by the federal government just prior to the 2019 federal election for the provision of 4 commuter car parks in Boroondara at Surrey Hills, Canterbury, Campbell and Glenferrie. On 25 October 2021, in a confidential session, our council voted overwhelmingly to call upon, and I voted against the motion, I might add, to call upon the federal and state governments to deliver commuter car parking at the existing Surrey Hills train station northern car park.
Councillor Franco, can you pause for a minute? I think we're getting onto a
Yes,
little bit
sorry.
dangerous ground. Councillor
Yeah,
Watson.
Madam Mayor, just a point of order. Should Councillor Franco be referencing confidential meetings and outcomes of those? Because I think that's a breach of our code of conduct, but I seek officers' advice on that.
Let's just pause and ask Mr. Storer.
Madam Mayor, to the degree that what was discussed in a confidential meeting becomes part of a resolution, which is then publicised, what is in the resolution is no longer confidential. The conversations which take place in forming that resolution, of course, remain confidential because they all took place in that environment. But the resolution itself is a public resolution once the council has decided that it be published.
Thank you, Mr. Storer. Councillor Watson.
Could I just ask Mr. Storer on a further point of clarification? And I understand the point that he's making, but to reference how councillors voted in a confidential meeting, is that a breach of confidentiality? Because that's what Councillor Franco did in reference to his own behaviour, but I think it strays into an area I'm uncomfortable with.
Thank you, Councillor Watson.
Chair, the way that our resolutions are recorded in the absence of a division is to simply indicate that a motion was passed. So how each individual councillor chose to vote is not recorded unless there happens to be a division.
Thank you, Mr. Storer. So, Councillor Franco, can I just ask that you stick to the point rather than use this as an opportunity to talk about a whole lot of other things?
Thank you.
So could you just talk to this motion and remember we only have 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll keep to the time. Thank you. As I stated, and the matter was a matter of as I stated, the matter was discussed and debated at a confidential session. The resolution was made public on 30 November 2021, and the council officers report that underpin this decision remains confidential. The vote on the matter for Councillor Watson's knowledge was the subject of a division. So the votes are recorded if anybody wants to check, and that's a matter of the minutes. I don't need to go into that. Council has undertaken public consultation in respect to the proposed commuter car parks at Canterbury, Campbell and Glenferrie, and I'm concerned about the limited nature. That's been the subject of some questions on notice to this council meeting by Diane Peck and others. But notwithstanding that, we've been inundated with community feedback in relation to the proposals in respect of those 3 stations, and judging from the feedback that I've received, I will. I'm going to tie it back to the point as to exactly why this ties, exactly why it's important, what I'm saying. Judging from feedback that's been sent to me on these car parks, which is overwhelmingly critical, it concerns me that we haven't adequately promoted. I mean, to the best of my knowledge, we have not consulted with the community nor publicised our decision calling on the federal and state governments to use the commuter car park fund to construct a commuter car park at the existing adjacent to the existing Surrey Hills station. Construction of such a car park will have a major, or would, if you like, because it's subject to approval from federal and state governments, but would have, what we're proposing, a major impact on the local community in terms of urban design and traffic management, but urban design specifically. We are now proposing to issue a final urban design advice and advocacy plan, which makes no reference to our desire as a council to see a commuter car park constructed adjacent to the existing Surrey Hills station. Irrespective of our individual views as councillors on the merits of providing a commuter car park at this station, I think it's incumbent upon us of ensuring the local community has a say and understands what we're advocating at the very least. And even if we're not proposing to give them a say, at least they should be aware of what we as a council are proposing. And I think it would be disingenuous if we argue that we don't need to do this because it's not on council-owned land, unlike the other 3 car parks. And we as a council are calling for this car park to be built, and it will have significant urban design traffic implications, and the local community deserves to at least know and preferably have a say. Thank you. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. Councillor Bigger is the seconder. Would you like to speak now?
Reserve my right, thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm not exactly sure how this can have an urban design and traffic impact when the work hasn't actually been done. So to Councillor Franco's point, I'm not sure that's quite an accurate statement. I'm not supporting this. Look, I understand the intentions of Councillor Franco, just to put on record some of the previous discussions, and obviously the motion that's been made public on the 30th of November that clearly indicates advocacy to both the state and the federal government with regards to this. But the motion that's on the screen, particularly item 5, has errors in it, which I don't believe are factually correct. And therefore, in its current format, I couldn't support this motion, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I echo Councillor Thompson's comments. The purpose of this report is to seek endorsement from Council to adopt the final draft Union Road, Surrey Hills level crossing removal urban design advice, attachment 1 to our papers, and the associated advocacy plan being attachment 2. Our role is to advocate for the best community outcome, and it's clear that we are doing that advocacy work at every possible juncture. Major projects will always generate emotions and community engagement that may stray from the core topic, and the paper that we're considering tonight doesn't take all of those other matters into consideration. It really is restricted just to the title that I just read out. So I won't let my comments stray to discuss car park feasibility. That's a separate discussion, albeit that I welcome the measures and considerations of the federal government to reduce congestion in our municipality and the CBD. So I'm satisfied with the officer's report and the attachments. I was happy with the officer's recommendation and happy to foreshadow to move that should this motion fail. But I'm sorry, Councillor Franco, I won't support the additional points 4 to 6 that you have attached. I believe they're already on the record and ancillary to the discussion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sinfield. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I do echo the comments from Councillor Sinfield and Councillor Thompson. I, upon reflection, would be comfortable to support point 4, but I believe for 5 and 6 are not necessary. So I appreciate Councillor Franco is wanting to reference particular dates, but I do believe that report is quite involved and comprehensive. So I won't be able to support this amended motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Now, look, it's in my ward, so I might just speak briefly and then check whether the seconder would like to speak. So for me, this is almost undermining a very important and valued piece of work for the community that the officers did put a lot of time and effort into. It was a very positive experience. And the focus was on the decking area, and if that went ahead, what we would put there. And to me, this is weakening a very important piece of work, which, while I'm talking about that, I want to thank the officers for the really excellent job they did in consulting with the community and responding to what the community said. I would like this motion to emphasise what I believe it's meant to, which is this piece of work. And like many others have said, we have advocated and will, but I think it's a separate process from this. So thank you, everyone, and I'll check the seconder. Councillor Biggett, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, just briefly. This has come in late, and I have a few little quibbles about the exact wording, but for me, and I fully support the officer's report. I think it's very good. I do think it's very comprehensive. I don't, however, think that adding several points will detract from that report. And I think that in the spirit of, I don't think that there's anything untoward in not mentioning these things, but I do think that what we've seen, certainly what we've seen over the last few months, is that this issue about commuter car park in our community is, I think we must admit, regardless of our view on the issue, it is very important to our community, and we've had quite a lot of discussions about it. And so I think maybe for me, I will support this because I think it's fundamentally important that we show our community that we absolutely, while we don't have the control over this particular issue, given that the car park is not on council land, I think it is fundamental that we show the community what we are advocating for and why we're doing that. And so we'll support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Biggett. So I'll hand back to the mover, Councillor Franco, to
Thank you.
close the debate.
Thank you. Look, I just want to address one point that Councillor Thompson made and a view that was echoed by a number of other councillors in response, namely that my motion contains errors which preclude Councillor Thompson, presumably others, for voting for it. I put it to you that there are no errors in my motion, and no one is pointing out any errors in the motion that I've submitted. It is factually accurate and correct. And look, I just think it's important from a point of view of transparency to be absolutely crystal clear about what this council is advocating for Surrey Hills. Thank you. I commend the motion.
Thank you, councillors. So I'll now put the motion. Those in favour? Thank you. Those against? Thank you. So that motion has failed. Now,
call the division.
Thank you. So we'll put the motion again. Those in favour? Councillor Franco and Councillor Biggett. Thank you. Those against? Councillor Sinfield, Councillor Watson, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Gillies, Councillor Stavru, Councillor Gold, and Councillor Addis. Thank you. So that motion has failed. And Councillor Sinfield, you foreshadowed a motion?
I did, Madam Mayor, but it is your ward. So if you would prefer to move it yourself from the chair, then I will withdraw my suggestion.
I'm very happy for you to move it. Thank you.
On that note, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Sinfield. And seconded, Councillor Watson. Thank you. Now, is there any opposition to that motion? Councillor Franco, thank you. So, Councillor Sinfield, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it has probably already been said. It was remiss of me not to thank the officers for their work on this matter. It has been enduring and many years' worth of work getting to this point, and I thank them for their efforts along the way. I have nothing further to add.
Thank you. Councillor Watson is the mover. Seconder,
So nothing further to say, but Madam Chair, it is in your ward, so if you should desire, I think the moment would be now.
Thank you. Look, I'll speak briefly and then see if Councillor Franco would like to say anything. So I have more or less said it, that the first thing is to thank the officers. It was a very interesting consultation process and a very involved community who gave us a lot of really valuable information, which I think is remarkably well, having attended the sessions, remarkably well reflected in this document. which is very important to the community, the open space and the opportunity to congregate. And this report well summarises something that is very important to the community. Thank you. So I'll go to Councillor Franco in case he wants to speak.
Look, I think it's a very good report, but its major shortcoming, and the shortcoming with it is the lack of transparency and consultation in respect of the commuter car park. And I think the community would have had a lot more to say had that have been made very clear. And I think the opportunity was there and it wasn't taken up. So I remain opposed.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. Councillor Sinfield, as the mover, do you have anything more to add?
I don't. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Thank you. That motion is carried. Thank you, Councillor.
Call it division, Madam Mayor.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. So I'll put the motion again. All those in favour? So we've got Councillor Sinfield, Councillor Watson, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Gillies, Councillor Stavro, Councillor Bigger and Councillor Gold and Councillor Addis. And those against? Councillor Franco. Thank you very much. So that motion is carried. Thank you. So thank you, officers and councillors. So our next item is 7.7, which is recommendations of Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on 17 November 2021 and biannual report from Audit and Risk Committee. And that's going to be introduced by Adele Thayer, Acting Manager, Governance and Legal. Thanks, Ms. Thayer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, this report presents the recommendations of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 17th of November 21. A schedule of reports and committee recommendations is presented as an attachment to the report. Also included with this report is a biannual report from the Audit and Risk Committee as required by Section 54(5) of the Local Government Act. With your consent, Madam Mayor, I would like to welcome and introduce Mr. John Watson, Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, to talk briefly to this item.
Thank you very much. Please do.
Thank you, Helen.
Councillors, thank you very much for the opportunity this evening to talk to the biennial report of the Audit and Risk Committee for the period to December 2021. The report is read, but would like to make a few comments before perhaps asking. Just by way of comment, in my opinion, as chair and based on my experience in a number of other places on similar audit and risk committees, I'd like to say that the Boroondara Audit and Risk Committee is operating at what I consider a high and efficient level. All members of the committee, both the council representatives and the independent members, contribute technical and quite inquiring discussion, which is always nice to see that these committees, when you're chairing, people do participate. Now, key function of the committee is to monitor management's work, its implementation of recommendations that arise from the various reports by the contracted internal auditors. And I think it's on page 259 of the papers, if I've read the papers right, which shows the number of recommendations at the commencement of the biennial period, what's been added, closed, etc., and the number at the end. The numbers are not big, and compared with other councils, they are on the low side. But the important thing I take from this table is that the number of recommendations at the close of the period is quite small, which is a very clear indication that management is working and does clear these recommendations to the satisfaction of the committee in a fairly timely manner. I might say perhaps that at some other places, I do see much longer lists of outstanding recommendations, and unfortunately, I see recommendations that go over time, become overdue. Not happening at Burundara. So I congratulate everybody that's involved. Amongst a whole lot of things that the committee looks at, and some are, this little summary report, but a significant area of interest for the committee is monitoring the financial performance of the council. That happens at all meetings, as well as, of course, the providing advice annually to the council on whether or not it's appropriate to sign off the annual financial statements and performance statement. The finances, and I was very interested in the comments from Councillor Galt earlier about capital works, and it's certainly one that the committee does have an eye to see the progress of delivery of capital works against programmed and budgeted things. It is a little bit on the low side, and I think that's been picked up by the discussion, but that's not unique currently amongst councils. It's a very difficult period, sort of going a little outside the report, but I think it's worth noting that contractors are taking longer to respond to tenders, so longer time is having to be granted. Supply of materials is very difficult. Workforce problems. The committee will continue to look closely at that. So perhaps with just those few comments, I'd be happy to take any questions the council might wish to ask.
Thank you, Mr. Watson, and look, thank you for all the work you do. We really appreciate it. It's very gratifying to hear those positive reports, and again, thank you for coming along tonight. So I'll hand over to councillors to see if there's any questions. Councillor Stavro, you've got your hand up. Thank you.
Not for a question, Madam Mayor. I foreshadow a motion at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Councillor Stavro. Any other questions? No, and I think that shows Mr. Watson how satisfied we are. Thank you. So I'll go back to Councillor Stavro for a motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Franco? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. For the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed to that? No, I can't see any hands up, so I'll go back to the mover, Councillor Stavro.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be really brief with that really great introduction by the Chair of the Risk and Audit Committee. I certainly share his observations. I've been in a number of committees in my career as well, and I can safely reflect that the discussion and the diversity of skills in that committee is quite high, and appreciate the thoughtfulness that everybody brings to those discussions. I also would like to thank the officers for doing the diligent work and preparing the reports, which are very important. Obviously, risk and audit are critical health checks to any organisation, and may we continue to have the low number of added-on items that would show, like the low temperature, that the organisation is in good health. Thank you. I commend the motion to my colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Stavro. Councillor Franco, you're the seconder. Did you wish to say anything?
No further comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stavro, I presume you don't want to say any more to wrap up?
Nothing
Thank
further.
you. Okay, thank you, everyone. So I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. So look, thank you, Mr. Watson, for coming along, and thank you, Ms. Thayer, for presenting. So we'll now move to item 7.8, which is Union Road, Surrey Hills, level crossing removal, long-term traffic impacts. And I believe Andrea Lomdale, Senior Transport Planner, is going to present to that also. Oh, Mr. Hondrakis has his hand up. Thank you, Mr. Hondrakis.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, thank you for your time tonight. This report seeks to inform Council of permanent changes to the Whitehorse local street network proposed by the Level Crossing Removal Project, and to explain how these changes will impact on the Boroondara local street network. The report seeks a resolution from Council to address these impacts. The LXRP designs for the new train station surrounding area include a station entry and forecourt facing Montrose Street with an associated pickup drop-off area, a pickup drop-off area on Montalbot Road near the intersection with Beresford Street, resulting in the closure of Beresford Street at Montalbot Road. The design of the rail trench means that Beresford Street must be narrowed to fit within a reduced footprint. For this reason, the LXRP has proposed that Beresford Street become one-way eastbound between Wilson Street and Gordon Street, and they're both located in the city of Whitehorse. It is currently sort of two-way. If we can put up the first slide just for a bit of an image, just to show the street network. Beresford Street is actually in the city of Whitehorse. It is the eastern extension of Montrose Street, which sits in Boroondara. Wilson Street is our dividing boundary between Boroondara and Whitehorse Council. The design of the train station and changes to Beresford Street will lead to an increase in traffic volumes in Wilson Street, as drivers seek to access the station, be it for parking or pick-up drop-off purposes. Other local streets in Boroondara, such as Montrose Street, Bedford Road and Blackburn Street, will also see increased traffic volumes. These traffic volume increases will have an impact on residential access and reduce the amenity of the area if left untreated. There has been no consultation with the Boroondara community about the proposed changes to Beresford Street and the impacts on the wider precinct. The LXRP has advised us that the Beresford Street residents in Whitehorse have been spoken to and are supportive of the proposed changes to their street. And also, Whitehorse City Council officers have authorised the change to Beresford Street. We recommend the implementation of a local area traffic management scheme for the Wilson Street precinct. A local area traffic management plan funded and delivered by the LXRP to Council's satisfaction and in accordance with Council's traffic management policy and procedures would respond to changes to the street network, provide the residents with an opportunity to have a say and reduce the impacts to the streets and precinct. We're calling on the LXRP to fund this study and any resulting sort of treatments by the time the level crossing removal project has been completed. Councillors, thank you for your time. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hondrakis. Any questions for Mr. Hondrakis? Councillor Franco.
Thank you, Mr. Hondrakis. You mentioned that Bedford and Blackburn streets would end up with amenity impacts as a consequence of the changes. I assume amenity impacts would occur as well if a commuter car park were constructed on the northern side of the existing Surrey Hills station. So I'd like you to comment on that. And then secondly, the timing of the LATM that we're calling upon vis-a-vis. So I'll phrase it a bit more clearly. On the one hand, we're advocating for a commuter car park right there. How do we incorporate that into a request for an LATM? Could it be a two-pronged one that includes it and one that doesn't include the commuter car park? And should we be advocating for that?
Thank you. Mr. Hondrakis.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Look, I think we sort of mentioned it a little bit earlier. There's currently a deficit in the number of parking spaces that the LXRP intend to provide. The shortfall is 83 spaces if it includes the parking in both the city of Boroondara and the city of Whitehorse. And that actually reduces to 28 if we don't take into account the on-street parking. Look, I think it's fair to say that the existing shortfall and would need to sort of be taken into account with respect to traffic projections and where this traffic would actually sort of access the precinct, whether it's through Wilson Street or Blackburn Street or Montrose Street. So we certainly need to take that into account. The deficit, we can compare it to sort of existing levels, and by that time we may have a little bit more clarity with respect to what may actually happen with the commuter car parking. I think that the second question related to the timing of the local area traffic management plan. We certainly want that process to commence in the short term. Local area traffic management plans aren't developed within a few months. There's a need to involve the community. It might take, well over 12 months to actually come up with a plan that is in line with council's policies and also involve the community. And bear in mind that we'd also have to take into account City of Whitehorse as well. So there'd be a need to consult with them as well. So the intention is that we come up with an agreed plan and advocate to the LXRP that it be implemented in time for the opening of the new station.
Thank you, Mr. Hondrakis. Any other questions from anyone? Councillor Franco.
Yes, just to be clear, I think it's important. Will we advocate for the LATM or portion of it to include consideration of the commuter car park that we are advocating for? Because the treatments, the consultation, the treatments we come up with for the local area network will be different if there is a large-scale commuter car park in the site that we're proposing. And if we simply go to the LXRP, state government project people, and say develop an LATM, they'll base it on their current proposal. Is that what we're advocating, or are we advocating that they also do it on our vision, which includes a commuter car park?
Hondrakis.
May respond to that.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Storer.
Yes, I think the answer lies in whether or not the state and federal government come to an agreement about the commuter car park. I don't see any point in going to the community with a proposal that they are not going to be committed to and doing it for the sake of winding up the community in the hope that they might either support or oppose such a project. So I think that the answer will depend upon whether or not we can have a state and federal government reaching agreement to either pursue that car park or not. If the decision is to pursue it, then I think you're quite right. You would then include that proposition in such a conversation. If, however, they cannot reach agreement and they say that they are not going to proceed with it, then there is no point consulting the community with regard to a proposal which is not going to come to fruition. So I think we sort of have to wait a little to see whether the state and the federal government engage in further talks and actually reach a point of agreement around that car park.
Thank you, Mr. Storer. Councillor Franco, did that answer your question?
Thank you, yes.
Thank you. And are there any other questions for officers? No, thank you. So I'm in search of a motion. Thank you, Councillor Watson. And Councillor Hollingsworth may be seconding, depending on the motion. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we've had quite lengthy discussions on this tonight, so I will be very simple and to the point and move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Watson. And was that what you had in mind, seconding, Councillor Hollingsworth?
Yes, thank you, Madam.
So is anyone opposed to that motion? No, thank you. So I'll hand back to Councillor Watson to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sorry if I should get it put up. I am sorry. Maybe we should just make sure we all know what we're talking about. You can just hold off for a moment. Thank you. Councillor Watson, are you happy to move that?
Yes, I am, Madam Chair.
Yeah, and I'm assuming Councillor Hollingsworth, you'd seen it. Thank you. So sorry, Councillor Watson, I'll hand back to you to speak to the motion.
And thank you, Madam Chair, and I have nothing further to say. I'm happy to have the motion put.
Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth, the same. I can see you nodding.
Yes, thank you.
So I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? So that motion's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. So we'll now go to, I think it's 7.9, instrument of delegation, council to council staff. And that's going to be introduced by Kristen Ritchie, Coordinator of Governance. Thanks, Kirsten.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. Before you all tonight, councillors, are the revised instruments of delegation from Council to the Chief Executive Officer and from Council to Council staff. The instruments of delegation have been revised to take into account legislative, policy and organisational changes since the previous instruments were adopted. The revised instrument of delegation to the Chief Executive Officer is based upon the previous instrument considered by Council on the 28th of June 2021. The amendments proposed to this instrument have been recommended by the Strategic Procurement Team to better align the instrument with the procurement policy adopted by Council on the 13th of December 2021. The revised instrument of delegation to members of Council staff is based upon the previous instrument considered by Council on the 28th of June 2021. The instrument has been amended in response to legislative changes mainly. I commend the officer's recommendation to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Ritchie. Councillors, does anyone have any questions for Ms. Ritchie? Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, not a question, but I just wanted to foreshadow an alternate motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Councillor Franco.
Yes, in relation to the page 12, the change in the ability to exercise a delegation, could the CEO or the relevant officer explain the difference in the delegation compared to the current situation to the proposed situation? And what is the minimum or maximum contract that can be approved currently by the CEO without resolution of a council?
Ms. Ritchie,
Questions there.
happy to have it.
So through you, Chair. So this is from Council to the CEO. All the changes have been marked in attachment 1 to the report, which has tracked changes. And you will note that the only change to that instrument of delegation is to authorise a variation to any contract. So in regards to awarding a contract or approving a purchase or payment, the total financial limit is 500,000 excluding GST unless the contract, purchase or payment has been previously approved by resolution of council. And the main changes to the CEO one is the percentage that may increase for the variation to 20% or $500,000, where I believe previously it was 10% or $100,000.
Thank you, Ms. Ritchie. Councillor Thompson, you had a question?
Yeah, just following on from that, just to understand why the material increase from 10 to 20%.
That was provided, sorry, through you, Chair, that was provided to us directly from the procurement department, and it was suggested that it was to make it in line with the council adopted procurement policy. Any further detail than that, I would probably defer to the Chief Financial Officer.
Could we just get a clarification on that then, on that basis?
Perhaps through you, Madam Mayor, the answer is that it aligns with the procurement policy, which has been adopted by council. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I guess, that with some of the larger projects we're doing, it probably relates more to the scale of those projects, where you're talking many, many millions of dollars in total cost. But the primary issue is it actually is aligned with the procurement policy adopted by Council.
Thank you, Mr. Storer. Councillor Thompson, did that? You've got another question?
Just thanks for that, Madam Mayor. I don't want to labour on it. Does the procurement policy allow that 10% to come back to the council chamber for resolution rather than delegation?
Mr. Storer? Ms. Montalto?
Perhaps if I could respond this way, if the council is concerned about that, then I would suggest that you not feel fettered by the procurement policy. What's most important is that you adopt what you are comfortable with, and if we need to change the procurement policy, we'll do that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got Councillor Gold, Councillor Sinfield, and Councillor Franco, and Councillor Stavro. So Councillor Gold.
If I could just pick up where the CEO left off, and I can understand why you would increase the limits on working on major projects. And my understanding is it's quite often because of the slowing down of the project for the decision-making time. Do you believe that not increasing it could slow the performance of the contract in any way, shape or form?
Madam Mayor, the answer to that would be yes. By the time you go through the preparation of the report and you will wait for the appropriate council meeting to arrive, that does have the potential to slow down the ongoing project completion.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we had Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. My point was largely similar. If I flip the question that Councillor Thompson asked, if we move now to a 20% allowance in difference, will it be in direct conflict with the procurement policy? I'm trying to pull that up to quickly reference it. And perhaps if officers could also tell me where it is so I can have a quick scan.
Can anyone provide that answer?
We'll need to look at the policy.
Sorry, I was about to say I don't have the policy at hand. Sorry, I'd have to find that and maybe take that on notice, but I'll give it a shot if you don't mind continually asking questions. I'll try and find that.
Thanks, Ms.
Thanks. And just as a side comment, if officers might be able to put it in the policies and guidelines folder, that would be helpful. But I'll Google it. I imagine it's a public document. So, Ms. Montalto, I can Google that.
Yeah. And just for context through you, Madam Mayor, when we did have conversations with the head of procurement, she did say it was to accommodate and align with the new tendering threshold of $500,000 that had been included in the procurement policy.
Thanks, Ms. Ritchie. Maybe we'll go to other questions and then Councillor Sinfield, if you have a follow-up. So I think Councillor Franco was next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I ask what process is in place for notifying councillors in respect of decisions taken under delegation of the proposed nature, whether it's the current cut-off or the proposed cut-off? And I ask this because, I mean, it goes back to some of the other questions I think Councillor Thompson was alluding. Where do we stand in terms of our ability to, I may be misconstruing this, but if we as a council body wish to exercise power in relation to a particular decision, we may not find out about it until after the event, or potentially not find out about it. So that's what I'd like some advice on.
Is that a question for you, Mr. Storer, or?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to assist. I guess if the scenario is that officers are going to advise councillors of their intention to exercise their delegation prior to exercising it, and to do so on the basis that there is going to be uncertainty about whether or not an individual councillor would be supportive of the exercise of that delegation, it tends to actually negate the benefit of delegation at all, in the sense that you don't know whether you're going to get a response, you don't know how long you're going to take to get a response, you don't know what the response is going to be. Meanwhile, you're sitting around waiting for one of 11 people, or maybe more, to make a choice about whether they want to show an interest in a particular delegation to be exercised. So I'm not sure that it's really practically feasible for officers to be awaiting the exercise of delegation in those circumstances. If what councillors want is some form of reporting in relation to delegation exercise, particularly where it's over a particular threshold, well, that can certainly be arranged. There's no problem with that at all. That would be helpful to councillors. But I do think putting a requirement that you first of all broadcast the intention to potentially exercise a delegation and await a response is not a particularly efficient way in which to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Storer. Councillor Councillor Franco, you have a further question?
Yes, look, it's partly answered, but I'd like to make the point. One is being notified after the event and potentially being given a briefing in some sort of the decisions that's been taken. But I'll put forward another suggestion and seek some comment. In the federal parliament, when parliamentarians propose new regulations, what they do, the minister will have delegation to adopt those, but they will table those regulations, wait a set number of days, 21 days or whatever it may be, and various parliamentarians have the opportunity to call in and say, look, we want to debate this in parliament. If they, after a certain period of time, that period has expired, and the minister has the ability to make a decision, or they're implemented effectively then and there. And I was proposing that we could have a system analogous to that, which allows us time and insight if it's a matter of interest to us. And if it's not, then it's not. But I think that would provide greater transparency.
Madam Chair, I think Councillor Franco was seeking a comment, if I may. I'm not sure I would use the pace at which things progress through Parliament as an example of how one should operate, I'd have to say. But look, anything's achievable if that's what you want. I would just highlight the fact that that process does slow down getting things done. And, you know, we like to pride ourselves on doing what we can to actually complete the things you said you want done. So it's sort of, I guess it just comes back to the point as to how you want the efficiency with which things are done to be set up in council. And I fully understand the concepts of transparency and accountability, which sit behind what Councillor Franco is raising. I think though that we've got appropriate guidelines in our procurement policy, which specify quite clearly how decisions need to be made, the process we need to go through to make those decisions, to ensure that there is appropriate probity, that we get the best value outcome for our community, and that to reach a point where it becomes important to rely and trust the administration to be able to live according to the things you've specified through that policy. So I suppose my proposition would be that we'd be more comfortable reporting to you how the delegations have been exercised. I don't think you actually get a chance to see all of that now in relation to contracts. And that, I know that doesn't overcome the issues being raised by Councillor Franco, but that would be the preference that I guess we would put to you for consideration.
Thank you. So, Councillor Franco, are you prepared to perhaps raise this in
Yes, I
a
have no more
briefing
questions.
session? Should you want to pursue it?
I have no more questions at this point.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Now, Councillor Stabber, did you have your hand up earlier?
I did, but I wasn't going to keep it up that long. Thanks.
Yeah.
Look, it is question time, so I don't propose to make any comments. The one question that I want to understand is, yes, the 100,000 and 10% was the previous rule, I guess, or condition that we had in there. How long has that been in place? Can somebody answer that?
Thank you.
Can't give you an exact number of years, but I'd suggest that it has been a while. Hasn't really been updated to reflect the change in the scale and costing of projects.
And the increase in costs of various projects. So thank you for that. And presumably, and it's a question that sort of helps me calibrate what I think about the current proposal, that $100,000 and 10% may have been useful to the projects and environment at the time, and therefore that's why it wasn't different.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. Now I think Councillor Galton, then Councillor Thompson.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Would you be happy if I just made a couple of quick comments? I think they're important based on my previous comment on scale delegation.
So are you able to do it as a question? Because we really are in question time.
All right. Would it be of assistance to overcome the current queries if we were to adopt what is usually a common practice within, for instance, large state government projects, where the delegation is increased in size to match the size of the project, but delegation only applies where the delegation or the sum being considered is within the budget provision. Where it's outside it has to be deferred to another body like a council or a steering committee. So it's only referred if it's outside budget, or if, and then at the end of the month, things are all major decisions are reported. Would that be of assistance too? So there's reporting built into it, and there's a qualification on the delegation that the budget is there to handle it. Would that help us out of our current discussions?
Well, Mr. Storer, are you able to answer that, or are we getting a bit far off track because we are considering a report?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to answer the question. What's been said is reasonable in the sense that, first of all, we would never approve a variation outside budget. That would always come back to council, and you've seen that happen with the Peer Recreation Centre already in relation to the contamination, for example. So that would always be our practice. We would not approve something which is actually outside budget. We don't have authority to do that. So that would be a council decision and a referral. In terms of there being some relationship with the scale of the project, that's something that's worth thinking about. We could go back and have another look at the procurement policy and these delegation guidelines to come back with an alternative. If that is the wish of the group, we could absolutely do that.
Can I clarify, Mr. Storer, that would mean we'd defer this item?
What I would suggest you do is, instead of the delegation referring to the $500,000 in this report, I'd suggest you revert back to the old provision on the basis that we come back to you with some suggestions which reflect what Councillor Gold has put forward.
Thank you, Mr. Storer. Councillor Thompson and then Councillor Sinfield.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I like what the CEO suggested there. In the event that that doesn't occur, through you to the CEO, Mr. Storer, you mentioned that there's a potential that it could delay projects and procurement and things like that. Have you got an example of where it has actually previously delayed such a thing?
I haven't had an example to this point where I've had to exercise this level of delegation. There are variations we've brought to council for consideration which go beyond our delegations. So the time lost there, of course, is just what's associated with the report and getting an appropriate meeting lined up and getting a council decision. So I can't give you a specific example right now. I'm just talking about the process one has to go through.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just going to suggest that we're getting a fair way off topic and a motion has been foreshadowed. And until we see that on the screen and see what Councillor Hollingsworth is proposing, perhaps we should stay on track.
Is everyone happy to, does everyone feel they've had their questions answered? Thank you. So we'll go to Councillor Hollingsworth. You did propose an alternative motion.
Right. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, colleagues, for all the questions put forward, because I think it's helped facilitate what is now going to lead to my alternate motion. Now, look, I haven't asked for a motion to be prepared, and the officers may need a few minutes to compose something. But in essence, what I was going to recommend is, and thank you, officers, for reverting back to what the original percentage was with regard to flexibility to variation of the cumulative value. And at the appropriate opportunity, I'd like to speak to this motion if we can seek to have someone second it. Thank you.
Yes, so the motion that's up on the screen is what you'd like to move?
Yes, thank you.
And I can see Councillor Sinfield's hand up. You're happy to second?
I am.
Thank you. Now, I can't see it. We might just drop that down. Thank you. So for the benefit of Councillor Hollingsworth and Councillor Sinfield, is anyone opposed to that motion? Councillor Stafford, you're opposed, and Councillor Watson? Thank you. And Councillor Thompson?
Not opposed, but just seek clarification of the mover, Madam Chair.
Okay, let's do that to be clear. Do you
I
want to...
wonder if the mover and the seconder might include some words to the effect that of what the CEO has indicated, that we might bring this back to a future CB&D discussion.
Look, I certainly support the merit of that, but I would like the opportunity to talk to the alternate motion this evening rather than defer to another time.
I think Councillor Thompson might have been suggesting an extra clause in this motion.
That's correct. I think the motion as it's up appears to be similar to what the CEO was suggesting, absent of a further discussion.
Yep. Thank you. Yes, I'd be happy to include that.
Okay. Now let's just see if, yes, the seconder's nodding that that's okay. Let's pause while we speak some words.
Thank you.
We might need to get the CEO to clarify that intent.
Can I ask a point of clarification as well?
I do, yes.
And I'd like to ask Councillor Hollingsworth whether she considers, and I'm happy that others, yourself, Madam Chair, or others may wish to comment on staff, but I put it to Councillor Hollingsworth, where's Councillor Galt's point of view about ensuring that the variation is within budget, which the CEO agreed was the case, putting a few additional words at the end of the red words, which I can't see at the moment on my screen, but saying subject to the variation being within budget.
Happy to consider, but if the point that Councillor Thompson's brought forward, that this will come to a future CB&D for councillor conversation, it might be that other issues are brought forward and perhaps supported as well. So it might be best if we leave that to be included in conversation at CB&D. Thank you.
Okay, so let's see the words.
Might be having some technical problems. Yeah. In the interim, would you like me to speak to what was originally put there by officers and?
Let's just pause for a moment, because I think we should try and get the actual motion if we possibly can. I don't think we're going to need an adjournment. And I believe we're getting close.
Thank you.
All right, I think we've got something up on the screen. Yes. Now, does that look like what you'd be comfortable with, Councillor Hollingsworth?
Look, I certainly would, because it would enable then the councillor briefing and discussion where all councillors can participate, and obviously we then are afforded time to hear more advice from the officers as well.
Thank you. Councillor Sinfield, are you happy to second what we have on the screen now?
I am, thanks.
Thank you very much. We might just pop it down. So for the benefit of Councillor Hollingsworth and Councillor Sinfield, now that we've got it up, is anyone opposed to that motion? Councillor Stavry, you are? Yep, thank you.
Maybe I am, because I couldn't see it all, even though I tried to minimise it. I only saw the second part.
Let's have another quick go. I think it was in two. Are you able to see it now? I'm finding I'm not seeing all of it, but how are you going, Councillor Stavry?
Excuse me, Mayor. While it's up, can I just clarify? Is there more than the one block of red, or is there only one amendment currently to this?
On page one, there was red also. There it is. Yes.
Okay, so maybe we'll do it in two sections. So that's page 1. And then we can go to, that's page 2.
Okay.
Do we need to go back to page 1, Councillor Stavry?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So let's go to the mover. Councillor Hollingsworth, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, councillor colleagues and CEO and officers for your indulgence with this. Look, the reason why I wanted to bring this as an alternate motion is I have read the report, and as Councillor Franco alluded before, page 12 of our Councillor Porter report, or it's actually page 24 of 373 pages on the council website. The instruments of delegation with regard to the increased percentage to do with the correlation of the procurement policy that was adopted in December 2021 relates to obviously what I consider to be a fairly significant increase. And whilst I can appreciate the procurement department in consultation with ELT and others have determined that it is appropriate and aligns with some legislation to have the ability and authority to do that, it's not something that I feel I've had a level of comfort with discussing at CB&D before the report came before us this evening. And I appreciate Councillor Galt mentioned that there potentially could be a risk of causing delay if the CEO didn't have the authority to act without having to bring this back to Council for consideration. But from my understanding, the 10% increase has worked particularly well. It certainly hasn't impeded projects. And in the event that there was an increase required or a variation required to be in excess of 10%, we hold weekly meetings. So whether it be a council meeting, a special council meeting or a service delegated committee meeting, I think there's always an opportunity for it to be brought before council to seek council support. And I think, again, aligning with the interest of transparency, due diligence and good governance, it's very important for council to have fiscal oversight of amounts that, particularly when we're talking about significant projects of a significant value, that during the course of a year, maybe 1, it may be 10, it may be 20. So for council to be able to track and have oversight, I just believe that as elected representatives, our community has that expectation, and I would have a greater level of comfort in doing so. So I welcome the opportunity to have this to come back to a CB&D and look forward to future discussions. And I hope councillor colleagues can support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Spinfield, do you want to reserve your right or speak now? Because I can see other hands up. Councillor Spinfield, you reserve it? Yes.
Sorry, I nodded and I was unmuted and muted. I will reserve my right. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I think I was glancing down too. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I understand Councillor Hollingsworth's intent and her desire to make sure that we have proper oversight on spending is certainly a worthy aspiration to have. But in this particular instance, I have absolute confidence in the prior motion that was brought to us by officers. A 20% delegation happens within the constraints of a budget. I also don't share the view that Councillor Hollingsworth said about these things can be brought to us on a weekly basis because we can't put certain things in certain meetings. So you would have to then dive into the realm, as I understand it, and certainly Mr. Storer may correct my view on this, but you then delve into the realms of special council meetings being called to approve variations. I share Councillor Galt's concern about making sure that we have a delegation that works for us. Slowing things down, even though we may do it in the spirit of proper oversight, it costs ratepayers money. I mean, we're already in deficit. So I have no concerns about the delegation as presented to us, and I'd be happy to move the officer's recommendation should the amendment fail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Stavrou.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I won't say too much. I'll echo everything that Councillor Watson said, and I think it's particularly important to ensure that we have right-sized delegations to smooth the functioning of projects where it's appropriate. I do share Councillor Hollingsworth transparency ambitions, and it is the right thing to do. However, sometimes we may actually work counterproductively if these limits or delegations are too too narrow. The previous delegation does appear to me a tad small for the projects that this council is undertaking right now. I think it's taken two of the most or the largest projects in its entire history, and there have been another large number of projects. I would be more comfortable if we didn't approve anything today and received a paper at CBND to discuss the appropriate right levels and get the insights and support of the organisation about what would be the more appropriate delegations. But to just go back to what it was, I think that's probably not the right thing to do. And even though Mr. Storer said that we should not be limited by our procurement policy, we did approve very similar delegation limits in that policy as well. So we have gone through that process and thought that that was the right level to approve then. So for the sake of consistency as well, we should actually not approve it in any change, rather ask for it to come back with further advice would be my thoughts there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stavrou. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay, so Councillor Sinfield, would you like to speak to the motion as the seconder?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I will briefly. In the current economic climate, I don't think that a 20% variation delegation increased from 10% is prudent and in the best interests of the community. And the CEO articulated that, in fact, it's not hindered us or hindered him in the operation previously. So I'm not concerned by this suggestion put in the motion by Councillor Hollingsworth. I've reviewed the procurement policy and done some keyword searches while we've been talking about this, as adopted by the Council on the 13th of December 2021, and it does not have any quantum of variation delegation prescribed in it. It does articulate procurement delegations, though, as we discussed earlier. It's not a matter of trust, as suggested by Mr. Storer and Councillor Watson. It's a matter of transparency and good governance on behalf of our community, who need to have confidence that we are acting diligently. We're available to have standby nights in our diaries frequently to ensure that there is no delay in escalating matters before the council if and when required. I would suggest that if a department needed an increase in funding for a project, it would require written justification to the CEO anyway, and therefore little extra reporting to bring it to the chamber. And I would make myself available, as I'm sure my colleagues would, should that need arise. I welcome the amendments made by Councillor Hollingsworth, and I'm very happy to discuss it further, as Councillor Thompson suggested, to ensure that it aligns with and is not in conflict with the procurement policy and other related documents as mentioned earlier by Ms. Ritchie. It's important that officers do have a working policy and delegation list to work with, so I would sooner determine this now and review it down the track subsequent to a CB&D if we need to, but I do think it's important to put this matter through tonight and not defer the decision to make sure that officers are not left without guidance. I'll leave my comments there and commend the motion as amended and put by Councillor Hollingsworth to my colleagues.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sinfield. Now I'll hand back to the mover, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Sinfield, for your comments. Notes I had down, you've actually just covered every dot point. So, look, in closing, this amended motion is certainly not to impede the process, and as it's just been verbalised, we can very quickly bring something to the chamber if need be, but projects certainly of large magnitude are going to have notice well in advance if there's likely to be a need to exceed an increased percentage in the variation of what the allowance and contingency has been put aside. So I see this put forward tonight as just something that will give us a chance to recalibrate and talk again as council, and then if a determination is varied from this, it'll come back to the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. So I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Okay, we've got that counted, and those against? So that motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Now the next
Call for a division,
item.
please.
Sorry.
Can I call for a division?
Yes, certainly. So those in favour of the motion, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Sinfield, Councillor Bigger, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gillies, and Councillor Franco and Councillor Galt. And those against, Councillor Watson, Councillor Stavrou and Councillor Addis. Thank you. So I declare that motion carried. Thank you. So the next item is 7.12, Robinson Road Car Park tree removal. And I think that's going to be introduced by Mr. Hondrakis, Manager Traffic and Transport. Thank you, Mr. Hondrakis.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, thank you for your time tonight. The purpose of this report is to seek a decision on whether to approve a request by Homes Victoria to remove 2 trees, termed trees 33 and 34 in the report, as part of the Bill Street housing development. The trees are both immature.
Mr. Hondrak.
We might have to turn our heads, but
yeah. So you can see the 2 trees through there. The potential removal of these 2 trees was identified as an issue at Council's Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting of the 16th of August 2021. Following this meeting on the 31st of August, Council made a formal submission to Homes Victoria to highlight, amongst other issues, that the development must be redesigned to enable trees 33 and 34 in Robinson Road to be retained. Council also considered various car park options for the Robinson Road car park at the Services Delegated Committee meeting of the 16th of August and the Council meeting of the 23rd of August 2021. The 6 options for the car parks did not specify that trees 33 and 34 were to be removed, and Council considered all options on the basis that they would be retained. Can we show the next slide, please, Helen? The 2 trees are shown on either side of the access road. You might have to scroll down. As part of the development, Beale Street is to be realigned further south with the new access point termed a vehicle crossover restricted to emergency vehicles. The realignment of Beale Street further south with the new access is the cause of concern regarding the impacts on trees 33 and 34 rather than the actual car park itself. The trees will be further impacted by the provision of underground services. The development was not redesigned, and the vehicle crossover to Robinson Road for emergency vehicle access was maintained between trees 33 and 34. On the 5th of November 2021, the Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change approved the Beale Street housing development. During the design process for the Robinson Road car park, officers advised Homes Victoria that the 2 trees needed to be retained. The trees are unlikely to withstand the proposed construction of a new crossover and services for the Beale Street housing development, with expected encroachment in the tree protection zones of 20% for tree 33 and 29% for tree 34. Homes Victoria tried to minimise the impact on the trees from their initial design, with tree protection encroachment levels reducing for one tree, but increasing for the other. Construction of the development has now started and is being carried out by Hanson Yuncken. The construction of the car park is intended to commence mid-July 2022, with expected completion by mid-November of this year. The car park is highly valued, and officers had advised that the new car park should be installed as soon as possible. If the trees were to be retained, Homes Victoria has advised that realignment of the access road and associated crossover will lead to an extensive redesign process, impact on the number of apartments, with an expected delay of 12 to 18 months, including the construction of the car park. Given Council's past position that the tree should be retained, officers are of the view that Council should refuse the removal of trees 33 and 34 on the east side of Robinson Road. Councillors, thank you for your time, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hondrakis. Councillor Bigger.
All right, mute tag. Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I do have a couple questions. Sorry, I do have a couple of clarifying questions for Mr. Hondrakis, if I could. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, we can now. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just want to confirm, I guess, the timing of the communication of the plans, because the 16th of August 2021, that was not the first time that we'd seen the plans for the Bill Street housing development. But was it that we didn't, it wasn't until that point that we were made aware of the problem with with the trees? Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Council actually considered the application on the 16th of August, and Council was made aware that trees 33 and 34 would be impacted, and as part of that UPDC meeting, there was a whole range of conditions, and that information was provided to Homes Victoria on the 31st of August, approximately 2 weeks later. And one of the conditions was that the development must be redesigned to enable trees 33 and 34 in Robinson Road to be retained. So that was provided through to Homes Victoria on the 31st of August last year.
Can I have a follow-up question? So, thank you. So can I then just clarify, was there from the 31st of August until the plans were approved by the Minister in November 2021, was there a response from Homes Victoria? Was there sort of a tic-tacking back and forth between Council and Homes Victoria about this issue?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm not aware of specific correspondence or discussions concerning the two trees. Well, what I can say is during the design discussions for the car park, that was certainly raised, the importance of trees 33 and 34 in discussions. We had weekly meetings with Homes Victoria, so it was raised on a number of occasions, and then formally as well in November.
Okay, and just one final one, if I could. So you referred to the potential delay to the development as a result of these the retention of these trees. But just to be clear, you also referred to potential delay for the car park, but those are not necessarily linked. Is that correct? Meaning the delivery of the car park could be delivered regardless of the tree issue. They're different issues. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, look, we certainly asked the question to Homes Victoria, and the advice that they have given Council is that there would be a delay of up to 12 to 18 months. That would impact on the number of apartments, but they have also stated in written correspondence through to Council that the car park would also be delayed.
Thank you. Did that answer all your questions, Councillor Bigger?
Thank you, and I'd like to foreshadow a motion.
Thank you. Now, any other questions for officers? Councillor Franco.
Thank you. Could Mr. Hondrakis or the relevant person advise how many trees are being removed as a consequence of the car park that we have requested?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there were, when Council considered the matter on the 16th and 23rd of August, approval was given for a modified option 6, and based on the information that was provided to Council, no trees were to be removed. During the detailed design process, what we found out was that the information provided to Council failed to show a proposed footpath on the east side of Robinson Road, and also the concept plans that officers based the modified option 6 were out by half a metre. So we were acting on the information that was provided, and subsequently, one tree further south, tree 37, was impacted to the extent that approval was given to remove it. The reason for that decision was the tree, an English elm, was already in decline, and council would have stepped in to remove it within the next 5 to 10 years, given its poor condition.
Good follow-up question. So why? So when it's a tree that's impacted by the car park, officers remove it under delegation. When it's 2 trees that impact on the development of Bill Street and potentially hold it up for 18 months, we bring it to council for a decision. I'd like to understand why the difference in standards in that case.
Mr. Hundrakis, are you happy to answer that? Or should we go to someone else? Daniel, Mr. Freer?
Yes, through you, Councillor. Perhaps I can assist with that. And this is a decision that was made through our arboricultural team. The tree was in decline, tree 37, as Mr. Hundrakis has referred to, and it was not possible to build the car park in respect to that. These 2 trees are not in decline. These 2 trees in question here are not part of the development process for the Bill Street site. They are on council land and have been requested to be removed to facilitate construction as part of that project, and we don't believe that that is required. Again, that's been a consistent view of the council and, well, certainly of officers recommending that to council over the past 6 or 9 months.
Thank you, Mr. Freer. Councillor Franco, you've got another question?
Yes, thank you. Why were the arborist reports not included in this report, both for the one that was removed or the ones that are proposed to be removed?
Mr. Freer, is that a question for you?
Now, I can certainly answer in respect to the previous one. It's not subject to this report, so it's not been provided on that basis. Our arborist has made an assessment of these trees. We can certainly make that their report available to the council for review. Again, I guess we put this to you on the basis that these are trees on our land and we believe that they are suitable for retention.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have one. My question is whether these trees that potentially would need to be removed actually add to the amenity of the housing. Mr. Freer, is that one you can answer, or Mr. Hundrakis?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the main reasons that council officers recommended their retention is that they were in good health, they had good structural condition and good form. So we would expect them to provide amenity to all users. And that was on the basis of our arborist's assessment back in mid last year.
Thanks, Mr. Hundrakis. I can't see any other questions. So, Councillor Bigger, you had a motion?
Yes, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Gillies, I think your hand was up first. Thank you. So for the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed? I can't see any hands up, so we'll go back to you, Councillor Bigger, to speak to your motion.
Thank you. So I have to say I'm very uncomfortable with the way the situation has evolved and the position it has left us in as a council. And certainly as ward councillor, I feel that very strongly. I feel that our role, as I see it, is to advocate for the needs of our community. And as we know, trees are very important to this community. And in this particular space in Bill Street, the local community has, well, it's already lost a significant number of trees due to the redevelopment of the social housing site. And we didn't support the removal of many of those trees. Certainly on several occasions, we advocated for retention of trees on behalf of the residents. For example, we advocated strongly for retention of the she oaks abutting the houses on Burgess Street. But we were unable to influence that outcome. This is a circumstance, in my view, where we would not approve the removal of these trees if a resident requested it, or if a developer requested it in normal circumstances, as far as I can tell. And I think we've been very clear, I think officers have been very clear from the moment we realized the intention was to remove 2 healthy trees, 2 of the few still left at that end of Robinson Road. The officers have been extremely clear. These trees are on our land. We've said all along this was not something that we saw as being appropriate or negotiable. But I don't feel that there's been recognition of our position on this. Part of the reason I feel particularly uncomfortable with this is because I absolutely support public housing, and I support it on this site, as does this council. I certainly do not want to delay the building of this housing, not for a moment, which is why, and I don't think any of us do, which is why I suppose it's particularly frustrating that there hasn't been an effort at all to come up with alternatives on the part of Homes Victoria, or discuss other options and to find a way through that avoids removal of these trees. So I am disappointed by the situation, but I feel that there's no choice but to support the officer's recommendation. And I thank them for their work on this report at late notice and with a lot of a complicated decision. And I would suggest that we continue to refuse the removal of these trees. And I would encourage my fellow councillors to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. So before I go to Councillor Gillies, maybe I should just get the motion up on the screen. I should have probably asked earlier for perhaps those of us who are not so familiar. Councillor Franco, you wanted to speak to the motion?
Yes, I'd like to speak to the motion. Thank you. Shall I do that now?
Yes. So is everyone happy that they've seen the motion now? I think we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like Councillor Bigger, I support public housing on this site. I want to be clear about that. And I don't wish to needlessly delay the project. It's going ahead. So I'm concerned about that, and I'm profoundly concerned about that. And I am also concerned as to what appears the potential hypocrisy. I'm going to support the motion because I feel I have no alternative, but I feel that, you know, we could be seriously accused of hypocrisy. There's a mature tree on the car park site, and we, you know, prove its removal immediately. No reference to this council supposedly, and we were advised verbally that, oh, okay, we've decided now it's not worth retaining, and there was arborist advice to that effect. Meanwhile, we bring to this council a proposal which significantly holds up the project potentially, and we say this is a concern. So I think part of our failure is having supported a significantly large car park on what is green open space in the Gardeners Creek Reserve, and that deeply concerns me, particularly taking into account the broader context of the broader region with a larger car park further down towards Auburn and the use of the space. And I think we approved that in a way that is not becoming of this council, and I think it leads us into a difficult situation. But anyway, I will support the motion, but I'm very uneasy about it. And I can well understand if the state government comes back and accuses of hypocrisy.
Thank you. Now, can I check, Councillor Gillies, would you like to speak now or reserve your right? And then I'll go to Councillor Watson, depending on whether you'd like to reserve your right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll wait till Councillor Watson has spoken. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll speak in support of the motion, but I wanted to commend her for not wanting to hold up the project. We need to get these things built and to have people with roofs over their head. But also, I wanted to address the side issue that was brought up by Councillor Franco. We have very great needs in our community for at-grade parking so that people can access sporting facilities, our disabled community and our elderly community. So I don't agree with the characterisations that Victor Franco believes we acted inappropriately. We acted very appropriately, and I wanted to put that on the record. I support this motion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Watson. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? So I'll go to Councillor Gillies as the seconder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I support this motion, and I also refute the comment that Council has acted inappropriately. Absolutely, we do not oppose the public housing development, but this is not an easy one. The journey to achieve a good outcome is fraught along the way, and it's very disappointing to see Homes Victoria have overlooked the alerts given by officers on several occasions and not amended the designs before taking it for seeking ministerial approval. That's really disappointing. Our community values trees very highly. We all know that. And ultimately, this whole site will experience a loss if these healthy, mature trees are removed. So thank you, Madam Chair. I support Councillor Beggar's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. So I'll go back to you, Councillor Bigger, to close the debate.
I'll close it very quickly and just commend this to my colleagues to support the motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Biggers. So I'll now move the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Those against? So that motion's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. So our next item is general business. We do have one item of general business, which is a request Councillor Park has made for a leave of absence 28th of February 2022. Prior to the meeting, Councillor Park informed governance staff of his request to be granted a leave of absence for the council meeting this evening. I'm therefore in search of a motion that Councillor Park be granted a leave of absence from council the 28th of February 2022. Councillor Sinfield, you're happy to move that motion? And Councillor Bigger? Thank you. Can I just check if anyone's opposed?
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, not opposed, but do we have to call Councillor Thompson back in?
He's there, I gather. Thank you. It's all been done without me. Yep. Thank you. So nobody opposed? Thank you. So I'll declare the motion carried. Councillor Franco, you have a request and then you will need to leave briefly because of a conflict of interest.
Thank you. Yes, I'll declare a conflict of interest in relation to the matter and as it relates to my personal circumstances.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
I don't know how to depart this meeting.
Thank you. They'll do it. Thank you. So I believe that we have a request for a leave of absence from Councillor Franco for Monday, 7 February 2022. Is someone prepared to move that motion? Councillor Hollingsworth? Thank you. Yep. So Councillor Hollingsworth prepared to move it. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Gillies. Thank you. Now, is anyone opposed to the motion? Councillor Sinfield, you're opposed to the motion. Thank you. So now, Councillor Hollingsworth, can we go back to you to speak to your motion?
to support leave for Councillor Franco?
Yes.
Yes, happy to support as requested. Thank you.
Okay. And the seconder, I think, was Councillor Gillies. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Chair. If a councillor believes that they need to have leave, I believe that we should respect that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sinfield, you said you were opposed. Would you like to speak to why you're opposed?
Thank you. It's not a personal opposition here to Councillor Franco. I really disagree with retrospective leave of absence from the 7th of February. And in principle, I don't think that it's the right thing to do because it only speaks to the statistics come election time. I've not personally sought one. I don't intend to ever seek one. You don't need a leave of absence to miss a council meeting. It will just be noted that you are absent. And I might flag in a future CB&D discussion that we discuss this further because I think it's bad policy. Or it's not policy, actually. It's bad practice, I should say.
Thank you, Councillor Sinfield, and we'll note that that's an item for further discussion. Just checking, yes.
Thanks. It doesn't have to be tonight. It's not time critical.
No, sometime. Thank you.
And I might even change my vote. We'll see.
Okay. Okay. So let's put the motion that Councillor Franco is granted a leave of absence from council for Monday, 7th of February. So those in favour? Thank you. Anyone against? So that motion's carried. Thank you. Councillor, oh, sorry, we're getting back. Councillor Gold, you had a question?
I did, thanks, Madam Mayor. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we bypassed 7:13. Did we decide to do that?
Oh, I'm sorry, did we? I am sorry, I had it crossed out, but we'll go back to it in a second.
If everyone's happy to do that.
We might not be, but I think we should. Okay.
I'm happy to speak. I'm happy to ask a question without presentation because I have read the motion.
I think we probably should do it properly. So let's finish off general business and then we can go back. So Councillor Watson, you had an item, I believe.
Yes, thank you. I'm getting tired. So my item of concern and that I would like to have discussed urgently in a CB&D is about the bicycle strategy. And a number of us flagged our concerns about the bicycle strategy going out for consultation. And there are a few of us around this table whose inboxes are filling up with letters from very, very angry residents for whom I share their concerns. So if I can ask that this be put for a discussion as soon as we possibly can, I'd really appreciate it.
Thank you. And Councillor Franco, is your camera back on? We can't see you.
Apologies. I didn't realise I needed to restart it.
You.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we've noted that request, Councillor Watson. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. I have two matters for general business. The first is a follow-on from Councillor Watson's point, and I echo her comments and request. But for public visibility, I would like to see the consultation around the bicycle strategy and implementation plan changed and re-advertised, or deliberative engagement conducted to ensure that we're capturing the feedback of the entire community, not just cyclists. It's been suggested to me that by advertising it as a bicycle strategy, perhaps it's only people in Lycra or Lycra-like items that may engage in the process and provide their feedback, as opposed to seniors and walkers and other users of shared pathways. It can all be wrapped into the same item that Councillor Watson flagged. The second item that I would like to raise as general business is just a question to the CEO for clarity, as has been raised in mainstream media today. Does the City of Boroondara have any sister city relationships internationally? And if the answer is no, then there's no need to flag it for a CB&D discussion.
Is somebody able to answer that, Mr. Storer?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I guess two things I would raise. One is that we don't have any such relationships, and don't believe we ever have had, actually, but we certainly don't have. We did have a relationship at one stage with Same and East Timor, but I don't believe it was ever on a sister city basis, but we don't have. The other thing, I guess, is I just want to be a little cautious about the use of general business for councillors to raise all those matters they think they'd like to have subject to a CBD discussion. That's not really its intention. It should be matters which are related to what's actually on the agenda for discussion, and we have a separate process for dealing with items we might like to have come before CBD.
Thank you, Mr. Storer. So I think that's all the general business. Now, my apologies. We will go back to item 7.13, which is contract 2022/2 retail energy gas, large sites, and that's going to be introduced by Daniel Freer, Director of Places and Spaces. Thank you, Mr. Freer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I can keep my introduction brief. This report seeks council approval to enter a contract commencing on the 30th of June, I'm sorry, I should say, in 2023. This is for a contract to cover gas supply to 3 major sites: the Ashburton Pool and Recreation Centre, Boroondara Sports Complex, and the Hawthorn Aquatic and Leisure Centre. This contract has been undertaken, the procurement of it, through Procurement Australia, and the contract prices are reflected in Section 6, the financial and resource implication of this report. Those prices for the first 2 years being lower than the existing prices that we are paying under the current contract. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Freer. Questions for officers? No. So I think, Councillor Gold, you foreshadowed a motion or a question?
Look, I was simply going to apologise. I thought we were going to discuss the overall tender and what it opens us up for. But if it purely relates to the gas portion, I'll withdraw any questions I have. I don't have questions. I'm happy to make a recommendation.
Thank you. So I think that is the time. You're happy to move the office?
Move the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gold. And Councillor Stavrou, you're happy to second?
Thank you.
I presume there's no one against? Councillor Gold, would you like to speak to your motion?
No, I don't feel I need to add any further to that. I think the motion stands by itself. Thank you.
So let's put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? So that's carried unanimously. So thank you. Now we'll move to urgent business. Are there any items of urgent business? Thank you, no. Confidential business. So we do have one item of confidential business, 1082 Toorak Road. Councillors, I'm in search of a motion, in search of a colleague moving the following motion, and this is the motion: that in accordance with sections 66(1) and 66(2)(a) of the Local Government Act 2020, the meeting be closed to members of the public for consideration of the agenda item titled 1082 Toorak Road. This agenda item is confidential information for the purposes of section 3(1) of the Local Government Act 2020 because A, the item is council business information, being information that would prejudice the council's position in commercial negotiations if prematurely released, section 3(1)(a), and B, the item contains land use planning information, being information that if prematurely released is likely to encourage speculation in land values, and that's section 3(1)(c). These grounds apply because the agenda item concerns commercial negotiations and the premature disclosure of information would be prejudicial to the interests of the council. Further, the agenda item concerns information, land use planning information. So, councillors, do I have somebody who's prepared to move that motion? Councillor Hollingsworth?
Yes, I so moved.
Seconded Councillor Sinfield. Thank you. Now, is anyone opposed to that motion? So I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? Thank you. The motion's carried. So I now declare the meeting closed to the public and to members of the community watching tonight's proceedings. The live stream will cease while confidential business is being discussed, and we will reopen the meeting to the public at the conclusion of the discussion. Thank you. Thank you. So, councillors, could I please have a motion to reopen the council meeting to the public? Councillor Sinfield?
So moved.
And seconded Councillor Thompson? Thank you. Is anyone opposed? No, so I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? So that's carried unanimously. So to members of the community watching tonight's proceedings, welcome back to the live streaming of the council meeting. Having come back, this is now the end of business for the evening. Before I close the meeting, I want to thank all of you who have joined us this evening and wish you and your family good health and please stay safe. So I declare the council meeting closed. Goodbye for now. Thank you, everyone.